Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for Saturday, December 30th, 2017, the 8th year of Chungi, the 11th month, and the 13th day of this month. I'm Tim Elder, and I'm here with Ted O'Grady. We're in for the second King of Chungi, Hyung. This is the final King's Report for the Gregorian year of 2017. Tomorrow, of course, December 31st, we will not have a King's Report, but we'll have a Sunday service, and the King will speak there. And then Monday morning, we will have a King's Report, and that will be January 1st.
New year, Tim?
That will be next year, yes.
At least on the Gregorian calendar.
At least on the Gregorian calendar. But, of course, our church, we do things on the heavenly calendar. And so today, we're still in the 11th month. We still have more than a month to go, about a month and a half to go before the New Year starts on the heavenly calendar, and that will be on the Gregorian day. By Gregorian calendar, that will be on February 16th. That will be True God's Day, and we will also celebrate the holy birth of true parent Sun Myung Moon and Jesus on that day.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that's exciting, yes. Let's go to the weather. It's in the Cheonggyeong area. It's 11 degrees right now. Expecting it to cool down a little bit more, perhaps as low as 5 degrees before the sun finally rises, a couple hours or so from now. Sun these days rises after 7 o'clock, about 7:15. And today we're going to a high of 22 degrees. And I look here, and here on AccuWeather.com under the heading Looking Ahead, it says a cold wave from tomorrow into Tuesday.
Colder?
Well, I'm wondering, wait a second, what are we in now? But apparently because we're going above 20 degrees today, it's not considered a cold wave. I don't know. So a wind chill advisory is going into effect at 7 p.m. today.
Okay.
So, hey, we're not, don't complain about the cold, because it is not officially cold.
So we're in the tropics today until this evening.
Well, what's happening, though, is that today we have a high of 22. But tomorrow, Sunday, our high will be 16.
Okay.
So I guess that's what they mean by a cold wave. Sunday and Monday, we'll both have daytime highs of 16 degrees, nighttime low of 1 degree Sunday night, and then 4 degrees on Monday. Tuesday will be getting up to 20 degrees for a daytime high and a nighttime low of 4 degrees. So, yeah, I guess it's going to get colder. It's going to get colder the next 3 days or so. And so I guess that's what they mean. But a wind chill advisory will be in effect from 7 p.m. this evening. And so that means that the cold wind chills will cause frostbite in as little as 30 minutes to exposed skin. Yeah. Expect the wind chills to drop into the 5 to 15 below zero range on New Year's Eve, continuing into New Year's Day. And this warning is for Wyoming, Lackawanna, Luzerne, Pike, and southern Wayne counties. And this is in effect from 7 p.m. Sunday to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. All right, so I guess that's right. Not tonight, but tomorrow night. This is all right. So we still have plenty of time.
Okay.
This wind chill advisory goes into effect Sunday evening. It looks like. Tomorrow and today we're expecting a little bit of snow. In fact, I think it's snowing in some places right now. Not in the Cheonggyeong area. It's still cloudy there, but we are expecting snow to start in the Cheonggyeong area in about 45 minutes or so. But that's just a flurry or so, and well, it may amount to an inch during the day, but I don't know. Probably not even plowable. All right, let's go to our Rima for today.
At a certain point, though, the cold just, you reach a certain point, and then it's like the same.
Is it like the same? Yeah. Actually, I experienced much colder than this when I was going to college in Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, there it would get down to 20 degrees below zero on the thermometer, and I experienced to where every time you breathe in, your nostrils freeze. And then they melt again when you breathe out.
Right.
So I'm not experiencing that here right now. And so there is worse. And I think, we hear about Minnesota, they're going down to 30 degrees or something like that. International Falls, 30-some degrees below zero. I'm sure the hairs in their nostrils are freezing, I'm sure. That's what it's like in that kind of a cold. We're not having that much of a cold in here in the northeast Pennsylvania. So we're still pretty on the fortunate side, unless you like that kind of weather. I did not enjoy it myself.
I guess, if you live in the north, you get to like it.
Yes.
King likes it.
Yes. My first winter at college, at first I didn't understand why only during the winter semester, or trimester actually we had, why was it only freshman classes were scheduled at 8 a.m.? I discovered because once you go through one winter, you're not going to sign up for any classes that are at 8 a.m. After on your second or third or fourth year, because the 8 a.m. classes were brutal, walking across campus. Yes, but we're not that bad here. So it could be worse. Just know that it could be colder. It could be colder.
I suppose you have to be careful of frostbite.
Yes, you do have to be careful of frostbite.
In the area,
yes.
navigating the cold.
Yes. Yes.
We had this week the kids went skiing up on Big Bear Mountain or something.
Yeah. Was that yesterday or day before?
It was a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
My son Johnny's visiting. He's on uni in Seattle for a year, so we went up there, and it was quite cold. But we weren't actually dressed warmly enough to go out skiing, unfortunately. So my son and I weren't able to go, but those kids were out there going up and down that ski slope. But they had to take breaks now and then because of the cold. Come in the lodge, and surprising how many people were there from New York and New Jersey. It's funny around here. You drive around here and you can think the place is deserted, and then you pull around the corner and you hit a resort or something, and there's like hundreds of people.
Good. The economy needs it. All right, let's go to our Rimas this morning. And, when I first turned to this Rima, Ezekiel chapter 23, starting at 28, I couldn't really, I read it and I just said, Father, I don't know why you're giving this Rima this. I'm not going to be able to use it. I'm going to go to another one.
Okay.
But then when I got my Cheonsonggyong Rima, then I felt I understood much more the Ezekiel Rima.
Okay.
So I came back to the Ezekiel Rima. Yes.
Okay.
Me of little faith.
Happens sometimes.
Yes. So let me read Ezekiel 23, 28 through 30. For thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will deliver thee into the hand of them whom thou hatest, into the hand of them for whom thy mind is alienated. And they shall deal with thee hatefully, and shall take away all thy labor, and shall leave thee naked and bare, leave thee naked and bare, and the nakedness of thy whoredoms shall be discovered, both thy lewdness and thy whoredoms. I will do these things unto thee, because thou hast gone a whoring after the heathen, and because thou art polluted with their idols. Now in Ezekiel 23, the author talks about, God talks to Ezekiel about two sisters, and the Bible commentaries say that these sisters are symbolic of Israel and Samaria, and Father in heaven, God our Father, is displeased by how Israel has corrupted itself by going after the heathens and thinking that they can deal with the heathens and make a profit off the heathens, and use the heathens for their own sake and this kind of thing. And here that is spoken of symbolically in terms of whoredom, of a whore. Because that's what the whores do when women sell their bodies for monetary gain. As a father said, that the woman's womb or the woman's vagina is really the palace of love. In Korean, the word for the womb is jagung, or the palace of the sons, the palace of the child. But it is traditionally traditionally Koreans do refer to it as a palace. Very, I think, significant and probably an example of how God has revealed certain things through the Korean language. Although Korean language is not perfect, and overall it is a product of fallen history and so forth. But there are aspects of it that reveal God's truth. And so in my Cheonseongyung Rima, I'm in the book on True Parents, chapter 4, and the page here is, 212. A person as the representative of true person, a true person as the representative of history, would strive to teach humankind by saying, humankind, this is the true standard you must follow. Even if he had to make harsh sacrifices, a true person would nevertheless teach and pioneer in this way on behalf of humankind. If he knew the path and said he would take it only for his own sake, he would not be a true person. And the reason this helps me understand Ezekiel is that here, again, Father is talking about a standard,
yes,
an absolute standard.
Yes.
And we are a messianic group. We follow the Messiah. We have learned the new expression of God's truth through the Messiah. And we seek to change the world, to bring a new world, a new heaven and a new earth, as we follow this standard. But because we are in the world, we are continually tempted to become not just in the world, but of the world. Or, of course, the Bible warns us to, although we are in the world, to never become of the world. But this is what Israel was doing, that the chosen people were doing. And this is why God was displeased with them, because they had been corrupted by the idols. It says, because thou art polluted with their idols, have gone a-whoring after the heathen, and because thou art polluted with their idols. This is always the continual temptation that is faced by the chosen people.
God really hates idols.
He hates idols, and he's on the one hand, he's very forgiving.
Yes.
On the other hand, his standard is absolute.
Yes.
And it's absolute because, in the end, that's the only way that we can establish the ideal world that God originally envisioned.
That's true.
You just can't say, okay, well, let's meet halfway. No, it doesn't work like that. No, I'm sorry. Now you can go step by step. That is true. That is true.
To an extent.
Yes, to an extent.
It's
because
not easy to go step by step.
Well, but Father, I would say, continually, Father to me was always very aware of the reality of the present, but he was also very always aware of God's ideal. And he was also always aware of what is the shortest distance from here to there.
Yes.
And he was always seeking to take a step along that shortest distance, along that straight line.
Yes.
All right, along that straight line between here, the present reality, and the ideal of God. And many times, perhaps we didn't understand why Father was doing certain things. Sometimes what he did seemed to go against the norms, the common sense, even the morality of the present age. But always he was seeking to take that step. Even if he took one step, it would be a step that was in the direction of God's ideal. And of course, the present reality always changes depending on to what extent human beings accomplish our portion of responsibility. But Father was always looking at the present and toward the ideal, and always going in that direction. And so in a sense, sometimes he would permit things that were not necessarily the ideal. All right, but that was not compromising. That was understanding that this is the best we can do at this particular time, or that this is the best that this person can do, or this group of people can do at this present time. That does not mean that he compromised the ideal. He was always uncompromising in that. Yeah.
And that entails a lot of sacrifice and pain.
Yes.
A quick way.
Yes, that's right. Father went to jail at least 6 times that we know of, but he never compromised. In 1948, when God told him to go to North Korea, he went, and he was arrested there first because they charged him with having counterfeit currency.
Really?
Yes, because, and the reason, and actually a reporter asked me about this one time. I understand Reverend Moon once got arrested for counterfeit currency. Well, the truth is that he had South Korean, because he went, he went out to buy rice, and he just went. And so he had South Korean currency in his pocket. All right. So from the perspective of North Koreans, that South Korean currency at that time met the legal definition of counterfeit currency. So even now, what is it? Almost 70 years later, we have reporters running around charging Reverend Moon with having dealt with counterfeit currency. One even asked me this question one time. Unfortunately, I knew the answer, so I was able to give it to him. And if anyone asks you, I hope that you will do the same. Anyway, Father, Father followed God's direction and God's instruction absolutely in that way. And even though he was sent to the Hyung death camp, he still did not compromise.
No, he didn't.
In fact, that is where he composed the blessing of glory, which, if you can understand it in the original Korean language, it's an extremely beautiful verse. And that too that is a very uncompromising testimony of how Father speaking as a human being, Father is a holy God and holy human, but speaking in the position of human beings, as it says here, speaking in the position of the true man who represents history, testifying how he wants to attend God as God goes about searching for people who have awakened into freedom, and searching for, actually, the Korean verse talks about 자유의 생명, the spirits of freedom, the living spirits of freedom.
Tim, God gave me a rhema here that relates very much with this, and I was wondering why God gave me this rhema this morning.
Okay, I guess now we know.
But here we are. Okay, this is from Luke 14:26. It's Jesus' words: "If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple." So that's very harsh. But in relation to what we're talking about here of idolatry, because of the fall, there's a second subject, and that is Satan. And ultimately, in God's providence, there can only be one subject, which is God.
Yes.
And relating with Father's own life, as you mentioned just now, we know that Father literally abandoned his wife and young son to go into North Korea. So on an internal level, we are facing the choice always of discipleship. But Jesus says here to be a disciple. Now, you can be a believer without necessarily going to the extent of denying your loved ones in such a radical way. But to be a disciple is those are the people that are the point of the spear. Those are the ones who are called to reject the second subject, and that's really what it's all about. With idolatry and harlotry and anything that we seek for that is pursuing that second subject is ultimately from the archangel, from Satan. And so as you said, Tim, God has the iron rule of the principle behind his forgiveness and his mercy and his love, which allows us to go through our course of freedom and responsibility. I think 2018 for the Sanctuary Church is going to be a year of discipleship. Challenge to us.
Yes, yes.
It's a healthy challenge. It's an exciting challenge.
2018, I think, is going to be a difficult year, I would predict.
Okay.
As we go along in the judgment period, I think 2018 will be worse. It'll be we'll see more war. It's difficult to see how war can be avoided on the Korean Peninsula during 2018.
Right.
2018 will be the 70th year since North Korea was established, the North Korean government. Father has said that communism cannot go beyond the number 7. And this is the basis how he said he prophesied the end of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm. But war is also a chastening, and God reaches a point where judgment comes.
Well, war is, we don't believe in absolute predestination. Mm-hmm. The only thing that is absolutely predestined is the victory of God's will. And if human beings accomplish our 5% portion of responsibility, always it can go in the good way rather than the bad way. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps, I think there's always a chance. There's something that can be done to avoid war. Right now, I believe that is that we somehow manipulate or encourage, or however you want to put it, China to step in here,
right?
And for China to solve this problem.
You're a sinologist, Tim.
I'm not a sinologist. I don't speak Chinese, okay. But just in terms of the realities of the Korean Peninsula, it seems to me, because I know that China and North Korea have a treaty that amounts to a mutual, or not a mutual, but anyway, a defense treaty. They call it a friendship and cooperation treaty or something like that. But it does require China to come to the aid of North Korea in a time if North Korea is attacked. And in fact, China has said that if the Chinese media has said that, this is the official government media, has said that if North Korea launches an attack on the United States or U.S. territory, then China will remain neutral. That's probably the best that we can hope for. That's actually a pretty good thing. On the other hand, China has said that if the United States seeks to accomplish regime change in North Korea, then China will not allow this. And you can understand why, because certainly the worst case scenario, the nightmare scenario for China, would be to have U.S. troops on the Yalu River, okay. Across the Yalu River. In other words, to have the United States accomplish what General MacArthur wanted to accomplish in the 1950s, which is to unite the Korean Peninsula under a pro-U.S. government in Seoul.
Why can't China get along with the USA? They get so much benefit.
Well, China, I'm sure China could. China could.
Okay.
But it's the Chinese Communist Party that has a problem.
Right. The
Chinese Communist Party has a problem because the Chinese Communist Party wants to lead China between now and 2050 to become the strongest power in the world, economically and militarily and diplomatically. And to do that, they have to rise above the United States. And I believe they expect that at some point they will need to confront the United States militarily. I believe they think that they are not quite ready to do that now, but I think they believe that time is on their side. We saw a headline, what was it, Wednesday, said that on Breitbart actually, that said China expects to, or that people expect China to become the largest economy in the world, not per capita, but in aggregate, largest economy in the world by 2032. My prediction is that this will not happen.
Okay.
Yes, I think that because I think that the Chinese Communist Party will reach the limit of its abilities between now and then, and that it will collapse before that.
But this is communism we're talking about. What kind of communism is it? It's kind of a hybrid communism, capitalism. Because communism in general, look at Venezuela, I mean, look at Cuba.
So the Xi Jinping apologists are saying, this is what they said during the 19th Party Congress in October, that Xi Jinping has saved socialism. He is the savior of socialism.
The savior, then.
Yes, because he has created a model for success in socialism.
Okay.
And this is one reason why, quote, Xi Jinping thought has been added to the constitution or the charter of the Chinese Communist Party, which in effect is the constitution of the country of the country of China. So they think that by taking capitalism and well, this is actually done by Deng Xiaoping, who said that doesn't matter if it's a white cat or a black cat as long as it catches a mouse.
Okay.
So he was saying, let's go ahead and do what works.
Okay.
Let's this socialist economy obviously doesn't work as represented by Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution or the Great Leap Forward, which actually was a huge leap backward, and actually ended in many people starving to death. And so from the time of Deng Xiaoping, they've been working on how to marry capitalism with capitalist economy with a one-party dictatorship.
Okay.
But there's one problem.
Okay. What's that?
There is a God.
That is a problem.
One small detail.
Communists.
One small detail. And God created human beings with freedom and an innate desire for freedom.
Yes.
All right? So that human beings can exercise creativity and become objects of joy and objects of love so that God can experience love. See, this is a very small problem that the communists are overlooking. And so as long as there is no God, they're okay.
Okay.
All right? If there is a God, they're in trouble. Okay. And I think there is a God.
Yeah.
I know him.
Yes.
I've met him. So I think that China will not be able to accomplish, and the Western elite, which believes actually in the Chinese model,
right?
Because they see that the model of centralization of power that China is showing, that Xi Jinping is showing, is a model that they would like to adopt, for the European Union and for the United Nations, because the Western elite also believe that they believe that the American Revolution was wrong, that this whole idea of a common people being able to rule ourselves is wrong, that you have to have an elite class of aristocrats. Basically, they don't use that word, but this is basically what they're talking about. You have to have a political class and aristocrats who have been trained, at the various universities, Oxford and Harvard and Yale, who have the curriculum vitae to show that they know to show that they know what they're doing.
Right.
All right. Okay. Those are the people who need to rule the world. All right. And Xi Jinping is basically in the Chinese model is showing that this is possible, and so that's why they love him.
So this is idolatry.
This is idolatry, yes. The American Revolution actually was a revolution against that kind of a thought which was prevailing in Europe at the time. The election of Donald Trump last year was a reaction against that kind of elitism, saying that no, we know what we're doing. Yeah. We, the common folk, know what we want, and we're not going to allow the elites to do this. And this is why the elites in the establishment hate Donald Trump so much, because he is destroying everything that they've built up, and he represents everything that they hate. He represents the ability of the common person, the common man, to know what we want, and they really deeply hate this. And this is why the FBI and the Justice Department work so hard to get Hillary Clinton elected.
Right.
And this is why we'll cover today. But even in the face of obvious crimes, they chose not to prosecute. They chose to overlook these things.
Still.
And after their loss, they came up with this explanation: Russia.
Yeah. Big bad Russia. Yeah.
And they're still trying that. And we have an article today with our Democratic representative that says, as he believes deep in his heart,
Okay. Deep in his heart.
Deep in his heart.
He's a believer. He's a believer.
He believes that there is huge collusion between Donald Trump and Russia.
Really? Okay.
He wants to believe this. Anyway, we're getting pretty far off, I think. But maybe we're not so far off.
But I mean, idolatry, Tim.
Yes.
The expression of idolatry
Yes.
and whoredom and harlotry,
Yes.
as we understand through the principle
Yes.
that the archangel committed adultery, was the first pedophile, according to the king,
Yes.
abused that palace of love that you mentioned, the woman's vagina, the palace of life and
the
love,
womb, yes.
was abused and created a second subject.
Chagung is the womb.
Yes, so working secretly and behind the scenes and sort of so interspersed and integrated in human beings' flesh and spirit and cultures and politics. Now we see at the end of days the overt expression of idolatry on the global level.
Yes.
And the temptation is to yield to that because of the power that Satan tempts human beings with, as he did with Jesus. And we go back to Father and Jesus, who chose to go the quickest way, which is the way of death. You know, Kukchanim talked about this at the Freedom Society on Thursday night. We're already dead. We already died. He and the king died and went into the wilderness. He and the king rejected idolatry. He and the king honorably rejected the temptation of power. They could have sat there and lived in a palace with billions and pretended to be the leaders of all humankind, while knowing in their hearts that they had betrayed Father. But instead, they as brothers from their own conscience went to the wilderness and died. So Kukchanim is, in my book, Kukchanim's a huge hero.
Yes, he is.
Because he truly just gave up his life without reservation and supported his brother 1,000%. But the beauty of it is, King, when we die to ourselves, when we reject the devil, we reject Satan, we reject the fallen lineage, then we feel freedom. Then we come into the light of grace and the light of Christ. This is the fast way, the quick way that God has given us. But there are times, like Father faced when he went to North Korea, when he was given a commandment by God that was so difficult to follow, and yet he did. And that is what is so, for all of us, is it just gives us such a deep respect and love for true Father and for Jesus Christ and the saints who obeyed those directions. And sometimes in our lives, Tim, we maybe have gotten that direction and may or may not have followed it, or we may get that direction in the future. And that will be a moment for us to decide, individually or corporately, will we follow that direction of God to die and to give ourselves entirely so that God's kingdom can be established, so that idolatry can be wiped out, so that one subject, God, can emerge and live in the world.
I've mentioned before that part of Father's rejection of idolatry meant that he was willing to give up his entire foundation at times that he had built, his external foundation at least, for the sake of what was right. And I've mentioned before how when Kim Il-sung died in July 1994, that Father sent Bo Hee-pak to the funeral, because when he met Kim Il-sung in North Korea in 91 or 92, 91, I think it was. At that time, he and Kim Il-sung pledged with Kim Il-sung that he would be as a brother to him. And so when his brother died, he of course wanted to, he couldn't go himself, and so he sent Bo Hee-pak as his representative to the funeral. But at that time, South Korean government forbade any South Korean from going to that funeral, saying that this was that they would arrest anyone who did. And in fact, the leftist organizations in South Korea did send someone, and when that person returned, that person was arrested. So when Bo Hee-pak went there, it was hugely controversial in South Korea.
Yeah.
And Bohipak actually, as it turned out, had to stay out of South Korea for a number of years, for fear that he would be arrested if he were to return to the country. But during that time, Father told the newspaper Sekai Nippo to support Bohipak and to fight the government on this, to criticize the government and to fight the government through its editorial pages, opinion pages, and also through its articles. I mean, in South Korean papers, there isn't that much of a line between editorial and reporting. So anyway, through that newspaper to fight the South Korean government. And the senior Korean leader who was Bohipak was the president of the newspaper at that time, but in his absence, another man was running the paper, and this man refused to do that, refused to follow Father's instruction. I've talked about this before, but I want to talk about it again because it relates very closely to the idolatry that we talk about. Father was in Alaska at that time, and I witnessed how over a period of a week, Father and this senior Korean leader were talking over the telephone on a daily basis, and not just once a day, several times a day. And Father kept pressuring him and ordering him to fight the Korean government, and this man kept refusing to do so. Really? And finally, Father ordered him to come to Alaska. Okay. So that they could deal with the situation face to face. And the man refused to go.
Oh, he was scared of Father.
And he just simply remained in South Korea and maintained his position that the newspaper would not fight the government on this. And his reasoning, the Korean leader's reasoning, was that, Father, if you do this, you are going to lose your entire foundation in Korea. Right. The government will destroy us. And the government does have that ability. All they have to do is call up the banks and tell them, hey, don't lend to these people. Or the extreme example, the nuclear option basically, would be to declare the Unification Church an anti-state organization. Right. Then being a member of the Unification Church would be cause for being charged with treason. Just to be a member would be cause for treason. It would be like being a member of the Communist Party in Korea. Okay. It would be the same thing. But Father, even after hearing this report, said, no, still, I want you to fight. So Father was willing to, Father was not an idolater. No, all right? Not at all. And as I said, he always was aware of the present and aware of the ideal and always aware of that straight line between the two and always wanting to take that one step along that straight line. So he was willing to give up his entire external foundation now. Right. Nobody can take away the internal foundation. All right? So no matter what happened, our faith would remain the same. But he was willing to give up all the companies, all the organizations, and have the government shut down the Unification Church over this conflict with the government. And frankly, I think that with hindsight, if we had fought the government then and had everything and if the government had declared us an anti-state organization and had closed the Unification Church and destroyed all our companies, or actually nationalized all our companies at that time, as the government did do with the other companies in different circumstances, today we would be a hero. Yeah.
You mentioned that before. You went through this, yeah. Can you explain that in more detail?
Because today the political situation is completely opposite. You see, so if we had gone up against the military dictatorship, or if we had gone up against the at that time in '94, it was no longer a dictatorship, but if we had gone up against the authoritarian government at that time, we would be actually we would. Of course, you can always rebuild an organization. You can rebuild Father's foundation, as we are doing today. That's right. As we are doing today. And given today's political climate, the Unification Church's righteous action at that time would be seen in a very positive light, and as an effort to unite North and South Korea at that time. And the same thing with the king. He left behind the entire organization because he refused to compromise, as you said. Because he, in a sense, he died in that sense, because he refused to compromise and he refused to go along. And many South Korean leaders, again, advised him to do so. as he has testified. He said that actually, I was also kind of told the same thing, something very similar. But what the king's testimony, as far as I can retell it, is that people told him, just be patient, just sit back and be quiet, and all this will be yours in a few years, as soon as your mother dies. And his reaction to that was, so you're telling me that I should betray my father now, and then after my mother dies, betray her? How does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I was also at that time, shortly after, when this whole thing was going on, after the father's cosmic ascension, cosmic songhwa, and when the king and the Kukjinim were not exactly uniting with the senior Korean leadership or with the Han mother at that time, people were also saying to me, why doesn't Hyung Jinim just sit back and be quiet and just wait for all this to fall into his hands in a few years? I remember people saying that to me.
Right,
So I'm able to back up what he's saying.
Yeah.
Based on those conversations that I had in Korea with some of those same Korean leaders. But it's a matter of idolatry, isn't it?
Yes.
It would have been, as God says in Ezekiel, that would have been whoredom. Whoredom is what God, or in the King James version, it calls it whoredom, and God doesn't like that. God doesn't like that.
Tim, you had to make a decision too. How about for yourself?
Well, I was blessed in that I was able to be not as close as the king of Kukjinim, all right? I learned a lot later on that I didn't know then.
Okay.
But still, I was close enough that I could see that there were strange things going on. And so when Kukjinim was voted out, when the board of the Tongil Foundation, or actually a portion of the board of the Tongil Foundation, voted Kukjinim out of his position as chairman of the board in March of 2013. It was an easy decision for me to make, in a sense. There are the external things, how am I going to support myself, but, Father trained me for 40 years and gave me this ability and experience as an interpreter. So I simply contacted some translation or interpreting agencies, and I was able to support myself that way until a year later. After that, in 2014, then I made the decision to come and support the king, because I felt that that was a necessary decision then. And
you're a hero, Tim.
Well,
in my book,
I was in a certain environment. And I think other people have had a lot more difficult decisions to make than I had at that time. But anyway, so the thing is that the organization can become an idol, and often does become an idol.
Yes.
Our position, our job becomes an idol. And even now, people who remain in the Family Federation, there are reasons for doing so. In many cases, my wife is in Korea, and she's talked with a lot of people in our same blessing group, in the 6,000 couple group. And she finds that many people say, yeah, we know that Hyung Jinim is the successor. We know that he is the inheritor and representative body. But, if we leave now, how will our children get blessed? Newsflash, it ain't a blessing, all right. What they're giving you is not a blessing. But anyway, this is what they say. And we'll lose our income, and our child will have to quit college. We have 2 children in college or something like that, and our children, they'll lose all their friends. All these are idols. Right. I'm sorry to say, all these are idols. All these are idols. They're idols. And it's whoredom that they are practicing. And it's whoredom that they are practicing. I'm sorry, but that's just the case. And God has a certain way of dealing with that, all right? And here he tells us exactly what that is. I will deliver thee into the hand of them whom thou hatest, into the hand of them for whom thy mind is alienated. And they shall deal with thee hatefully. All right, so
that's what's happening, Tim. I mean,
and shall take away all thy labor, and shall leave thee naked and bare. And the nakedness of thy whoredoms shall be discovered, both thy lewdness and thy whoredoms. I will do these things unto thee because thou hast gone a whoring after the heathen, and because thou art polluted with their idols. All right.
So Tim, you know, it's time really for us, you know, as the point of the spear here. You know, I got one little other word here that Father gave us. This is Father's word, okay?
All right.
This particularly relates with you and me.
Okay.
And people like us, okay? And these kind of came to me together in sequentially, these reamers, yesterday when I was thinking about today. So Father says, among older members, there are some who remember only the fact that they suffered and who therefore have lost the power to march toward our purpose. These people are no different than the dead. So I personally, I've said a number of times, you know, to be sitting here with the King doing what I'm doing here. A few years ago, after Father passed, I was living in England, and it just felt like everything was gone. The feeling was that this whole organization is completely corrupt. A person like me who can't really internally accept this, cannot really be 100% part of this organization. There's no blessing in this organization. So, okay, Father's dead. How am I going to attend Father? Well, I'll keep him inside my heart, maybe in some way, keep my love for him, but find another way, find another path, find another religion or another practice. And then just, you know, this little birdie in my ear said, you know, looking at YouTube, Young Jin Moon, there he is out there in the wilderness, you know, with his little sterno, making a fire and, you know, doing a little flint, putting the pine needles together, making some pine needle tea out there in Pennsylvania, carefully making this pine needle tea. And it just intrigued me, and it just stirred something in my heart. So then another month or caught another video, and then the coming out, what was it called?
Breaking the Silence.
Breaking the Silence. The Breaking the Silence came out, and said, whoa, this is, man, he's really speaking strongly about this. You know, the language is like this, like Ezekiel here. And so still I was a bit like, you know, do I really want to jump into this again? I mean, is this really 100% the way to go? So it took a little while. It took a little while back and forth. But once God got into that inner core of my heart where Father lived and where my own personal foundation was, then it's just a matter of time, really, before that power just pulled me to sitting right here now. So, and that will happen, and that is happening to conscientious brothers and sisters. And the beauty and the joy of the sanctuary is meeting brothers and sisters like that, who have that heart.
Yes.
And later on, and I meet like half a dozen or so that I worked with together on MFT.
Yes.
And every person who comes here, I find, is a person who has been through the fire.
Yes.
Who has had to reject idols and made a choice within themselves that they're going to honor God and love true Father. And those are the people that are coming to Sanctuary.
Yes.
So it's
yes,
always
every person here has that kind of a testimony.
That's right. And it's always going to prick the conscience of anyone who knows Father and Christians who are coming now. And I predict that 2018 is going to be a hugely prosperous and breakthrough year for Sanctuary.
Yes.
Particularly with our Christian brethren, for ourselves, for our own renewal and rebirth, and our own rejection of idolatry as the micro. So, yeah, there's going to be tough times, there'll be wars, there'll be chastening, but in the middle of that, the phoenix will rise. As Father said so many times, the phoenix of Reverend Moon rises from the ashes, Tim.
Yes.
And will always be victorious, and we have our second king, we have Kukjanim, we have Cain and Abel united, we have brothers like yourself. We have the Sanctuary members. and we're actually bringing the Christian, the body of Christ is now coming to us. We had a Bible study here on Wednesday night with Pastor Barry Jaggers.
That's right. He's a pastor of his own church.
His own church.
Yes, and he came here for Bible study, and he spoke, didn't he? Yes.
Yeah, and he was a missionary in Uruguay and Brazil, so he and I have a little bit common there. And he gave a very spirit-filled Bible study here, and his wife Penny, and he agreed to come along and receive the blessing. We have a prayer breakfast set up for February 28th.
Wow.
So the Spirit of God is moving, and we just, like Kukjanim said, we're already dead. We're already dead. We're happy that we've given our lives to Christ. Now we're powerful. If they come and kill us, it's more victory. If Satan kills us, then he loses 100 million. The providence might go quicker. So China might break up more quickly. So in that sense, we live without fear, and we have to confront those idols in many ways. And for me living here, I mean, God is asking me just to trust me, Ted. Trust me in any situation. Just trust me. Okay? Whether it be money or life or personal things or mission, you trust me, and I will have your back. So we return that, Tim. We are invincible in the love of Jesus Christ and the victory of our true Father and the second kingship. We had a little blessing workshop yesterday back here. My son Johnny came, which was nice for me to have a few days with him because he's actually grew up in Britain, and he's a student at University of Sussex in Brighton. But he has 1 year over in Seattle, so he's at University of Washington in Seattle. And he came along, we lived in the Hermitage together. It was nice to have company for a few days out there in Holly. and he very sincerely came along. He went to the Freedom Society, and, Kukjanim talked with him again. We had a chance to meet Kukjanim in the Tommy Gun warehouse, we got like a half hour early, and he happened to be there. And there was the AR-15 and the AR pistol. And I think Jerry Hyung was there too.
Kukjanim, by the way, is often in the warehouse.
So it was great. I mean, I met him face to face and a nice conversation. I met my son for the second time, and I can see, how he loves my son, which I really appreciate. But see the guns, and it's the first time for me to really see the ARs and the beautiful pistol manufactured there at Tommy Gun Warehouse. But we're in the meeting, and it's just, we've already died. We've already given our lives. We're living beyond death. Therefore, we are already victorious in Christ. And we can reject idols, whatever may come our way, in any form, and stay in that light. And then through that, God is working his providence now and opening doors and gates from this point to the whole world. Aju.
Well, with that, let's take a break. I think we've covered this Rima pretty well this morning.
Okay.
Let's take a break, and then we'll come back. Let's take our 5-minute break now, and we'll come back and we'll start going through the news from a Tony Group perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Tim.
See you in a minute. Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, December 30th, 2017. This is the last time we'll be saying that word.
Right.
Yes, 2017. This is the final King's Report for the Gregorian year of 2017. And on the heavenly calendar, of course, we're in the Chungi 8th year and the 11th month and the 13th day, so we still have a ways to go before we greet the new year on the heavenly calendar. But today is the last day on the Gregorian calendar. We'll have a King's Report. Tomorrow, the 31st, we'll have Sunday service. And then on the Monday, the 1st of January, we'll be having the first King's Report of the new Gregorian year then. Let's go through some of the headlines on Drudge Report. On the Drudge Report, in the upper left-hand corner, he has boom of 17. Dow falls short of 25,000 on final day. Homeowners made $2 trillion on houses this year. Midwest factory boom and Hollywood stocks suffer. Gee, I wonder why.
Wow.
Now, Hollywood is having a difficult time this year. Their ticket sales are way down. We're not exactly crying tears for them, are we?
They went and saw Star Wars again, by the way.
Oh, you did again?
Son, yeah.
I see. Okay.
It was better the second time.
It was better the second time. I see. Okay.
The Last Jedi.
Yes.
You tear away all the political correctness in Star Wars, and the point that they're showing is the attack on the seed.
The attack on the seed.
Destroy the seed.
Okay.
And so
there you go.
The devil, Ben, Kylo, whatever, Han Solo's. And I don't want to give away the whole thing because one of the young people yesterday, Thursday night, was upset that I gave away a bit of the plot.
Well,
but
maybe
I said,
you stop where you
said,
are.
You guys should have already seen it. It's been out 2 weeks. But the attempt to destroy the seed.
All right.
We have the Last Jedi here in the sanctuary. His name is Young Jin Moon.
Let's not give away any more of the plot. We may have people turning away from us. We wouldn't want people to do that. But something is happening in Iran. There are anti-government protests spreading in Iran, and this is very significant for us because one of the dangers that we have in the world right now is a possibility of a war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. Now, when you have domestic protests, sometimes the government will purposely start a war in order to unite the country.
Right.
It says, hey, let's not be fighting among ourselves. Let's go after that devil Saudi Arabia, that kind of thing. So this may actually increase the possibility for war, or it may decrease it, because if the Iranian government feels that they cannot control the government, they may be less likely, cannot control their population, they may be less likely to go to war. So I have to see which way it goes. It could go either way. But there are anti-government protests spreading in Iran. We'll see how that goes. For example, in World War I in Russia, there was a revolution, and the communist or new Bolshevik government came into power, and they immediately made a separate peace, or they sort of pulled out of the war. So it can go either way. So if these anti-government protests in Iran lead to the fall of the current Iranian regime, then that could lessen the possibility, perhaps, of a war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So I don't know which way it's going to go. New Year preview, Trump war with Bezos. Yes, Bezos, who founded Amazon.com, and Amazon is increasingly becoming a very, Bezos, of course, is a progressive or one of these elites that want to have a central control. And he also owns the Washington Post. And the king has called on us to boycott Amazon, to not purchase products through Amazon, and to support local businesses, or support those who sell through eBay or something like that, but not Amazon. And one of the things that Amazon is doing is that every package they send, on average, is subsidized by the government or by the U.S. Postal Service to the tune of about, I think it was $1.46 or something like that. This was according to one study that was done. And the president the king has been talking about this for some months now, but the president now is starting to tweet about this, that the Amazon is not paying enough for their packages. So this is something that's very interesting now, that the micros took the lead, and finally the president is coming along. And this is something that we expect will develop during the new year. We can take a look at that later on. President ramps up Border Patrol recruitment, and he says, no wall, no dream. Another issue that we're expecting to sort of come up in January is this whole thing of the DACA, the Delayed Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA. President Obama sort of gave them a special deal.
Yeah. Dreamers.
Yes, the Dreamers are called, yes. And by executive action, he did this, not by legislation. And President Trump is saying, no, we're not, well, he hasn't really decided yet what he's going to do with that. But here, the headline is No Wall, No Dream. Most expensive mile on earth, $4.4 billion for a New York City subway. Well, as long as they want to pay for it themselves, maybe Bezos or someone like that can pay for it. New bitter blast, coldest New Year's Day in Chicago's history, ? Deep freeze danger. Record lows, plains and Midwest, a live chill map. Apple flagship struggles with falling ice and cracking windows. Global warming explainers race to justify the cold.
Didn't Trump tweet something about this?
Yes, I think. And they're saying, no, this cold is all part of the whole global warming scenario, you see.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. You may think it's cold, but it's actually, anyway, God gave us creativity, after all.
Yeah.
All right, so we use it in strange ways sometimes. Controversial film on Bataclan massacre postponed. Teacher fired after students see nudity in classical art. I guess the teacher showed the students some classical art.
And got fired.
And he or she got fired.
Well, they probably didn't know it was classical art.
A nurse shared nude photos of woman during surgery. Well, that's not classical art.
I went to the Wells Fargo Bank just on this point about the classical art, and the Nutcracker Suite was playing just above. So I said to the teller, "Oh, it's the Nutcracker Suite there. It's beautiful." She went, it's Tchaikovsky, you know. She went, "What did you need, sir?" So I reckon that with the
I think maybe the term
was classical art, Tim.
Wait a second, the term nutcracker, is that allowed now?
I don't know about that, but I reckon that what happened here is that maybe some parents got upset and thought they were showing lewd photos, but didn't realize that it was classical art, or what classical art is.
Well, let's move on. Goldman expects a $5 billion hit from tax overhaul. But Rubio regrets. Marco Rubio says that it helps companies too much. His concern is that, and others have talked about this, yes, that companies may bring their cash from overseas to the U.S., but how will they use that cash? Will they invest it, or will they simply buy back their own shares? Well, it's their money. They can do what they want with it. We'll see. Always, we have the law of unintended consequences. We'll see what happens. Kidnapped a crypto exec released after $1 million ransom. Okay. Netflix, a terrifying robot apocalypse. Droid dogs hunt and murder humans. Well, buy your AR. I'll bet those ARs will be pretty good against robots as well. Just hit the battery. Hit the battery, knock out the battery.
We've seen that in Sunny, right? The Will Smith movie a few years ago.
Oh, really? I didn't see that
against
movie.
The robots.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
New Year's Fortress, Times Square lockdown. Piece of advice: don't go. A, it's cold. B, terrorists are going to. That's a concentration of targets. As far as terrorists are concerned. Threat to high-rise snipers, suicide bombers. Philly cops use drones. Berlin safe zone for women. ISIS calls on disabled to commit attacks. So, okay, there you go.
What's that? Are they expendable? Disabled?
Well, they want to, get around this security cordon somehow.
I see. It's getting through security. Is that the idea?
Yes. Papers reveal MI5 plot to kill Irish PM. Worst graveyard shift, grinding up workers.
What was that about the MI plot? to kill an Irish PM? Is that recent?
We can look at it later on if we like.
Okay.
Worst graveyard shift for grinding up workers inside brutal dog meat industry. Sounds like possibly an article about Korea or China. We can look at that if you like. Populist uprising, anti-EU parties will continue to soar. Yes, this is, what was it, Tony Blair? Anyway, one of the former prime ministers of Britain predicted that populism will continue. I'm glad he sees it correctly.
Pretty safe prediction.
Keep calm and be average. China's unambitious millennials. Many balk at using snitch apps. San Francisco skyline now inexorably transformed by tech. California set for New Year's buzz with recreational marijuana sales. Now a suburban affair. Man rigs door to electrocute pregnant wife. Horses for divorces. More couples fight for family steed. All right. Major flu outbreaks hit 36 states. Oil resurrection sets stage for another OPEC shale clash. New York Times year-end interview with the president. This came out yesterday, and we'll take a look at it today. Didn't have time yesterday. Man screams at Trump robot doll during Disney show. Everything is political these days.
Trump robot doll.
Yes.
On a Disney show.
Yeah, well, I think Disney show has all the presidents, I think, and so. Year the news accelerated to Donald speed. American car batteries, top winners and losers, pooches growing at airports. I'm not sure what that's about. Decoy cell phones and armored cars. How Venezuelans avoid being robbed. And Saudi momentous year of change. Something very interesting is going on in Saudi Arabia. It's hard to predict how that will go, but this new Crown Prince is determined to bring about some major changes in Saudi Arabia. All the times this year, Florida put the F in WTF. I looked at that, and it's basically a story about all the really weird things that go on in Florida. I don't think we need to cover that. Okay. But let's see here. Yeah, let's cover the president's year-end interview.
I'm curious about those cryptocurrencies. I don't really understand how they work. I mean, are they negotiable if you have Bitcoin or whatever? Are there just certain merchants that will accept Bitcoin?
Yes.
Or is it,
yes.
Yeah, but not everyone.
Not everyone. I think already the number of transactions being handled by Bitcoin this year is in the millions.
Okay.
And millions of transactions. So it's
increasing.
And in 2010, I checked this on Wikipedia. The first transaction offline that was done by Bitcoin was in 2010 when a person purchased a pizza in Florida.
Right.
Talk about putting the F in WTF.
All right.
Purchased a pizza in Florida with Bitcoin.
Okay.
And at that time, Bitcoin was worth much less than a penny.
Okay.
And so this man, I believe it was a man, paid 10,000 Bitcoins for a pizza.
Okay.
Today, if he had not bought a pizza, all right, now, of course, he has a place in history, and I suppose that is worth, I suppose that is priceless. All right, so he has a place in history. But I'm just saying that if he had not purchased that pizza, but if he had saved those 10,000 Bitcoins, today, I don't know what the current price is, but it's something like $150 million. so I'm saying, all right, he purchased a place in history. Basically, that's what he got. Right. But I'm just saying, he could have had $150 million. I don't know. It's up to him to decide which is worth more.
I hope it was a good pizza.
I hope it was a good pizza because it cost him $150 million. But anyway, yes, Bitcoin is negotiable. I mean, you can. That's the point.
Okay.
And the point with Bitcoin is that you get around the central bank.
Yeah. Okay.
And so this is kind of like the internet, where you're not relying on the conglomerate-owned news organizations to give you the news.
Right.
I say as we go to the New York Times for this interview with Donald Trump. But anyway, yes, so the idea is this. So some form of cryptocurrency, as the king has said, and I believe it is exactly right, some form of cryptocurrency will emerge, and that will be a good thing. It will be basically the democratization of the financial system. But we don't know what it will be, and likely it will not be Bitcoin.
Right.
Just like if you think back, to think about what we were using on the internet, the search engines that I was using. My favorite search engine in the 90s was something called, I think it was called Alexa.
Okay.
Okay. It doesn't exist anymore.
No, there's a different Alexa now, isn't there? Is that the Amazon Alexa?
But anyway, there's other thing called Alexa, but there's the search engine Alexa that I was using back in the 90s. That was my go-to search engine. Doesn't exist anymore. Instead, I'm using Google. And I can remember when my daughter first created a page called on MySpace, all right?
Yeah, right.
And MySpace, I don't know if it exists right now, but I don't think my daughter is using it anymore. These things, Google and Facebook, they came after there was a .com crash, I think, in the late 90s, right? So there's a certain period that we're going to go through with these cryptocurrencies where things are going to crash, and then something new is going to come out of that, and something new will probably be sort of like the Facebook or the Google of today. It'll become really big. But anyway, and maybe Bitcoin will survive. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. But
then you avoid all those fees because we're working in Brazil. Having to bring money into Brazil and do transactions there. I mean, Bitcoin is almost like bringing a suitcase of cash.
That's right. Yes.
You avoid the whole ladrão system.
Yes. And if we had been purchasing Bitcoin back in 2010,
right?
And I don't have tens of thousands of Bitcoin stored away.
No, too bad.
I was not the owner of the pizza store that sold that pizza. Okay. I would like to know, what did the pizza store do with those Bitcoins? Because if they kept them, then...
Are they still selling pizza?
Probably not. They're probably relaxing on the beaches of Florida. But I was not the owner of that store that sold that pizza. All right. So anyway, but right now, Bitcoin, I would say, it looks like a bubble. That's all I will say. It looks very much like a bubble. I would not go near it with a 10-foot pole or even a 100-foot pole.
You got this guy, the absent-minded professor with the frizzy hair, the cryptocurrency guru. He's saying that there's 200 billion in cryptocurrency, but there's 200 trillion in demand for currency. So he's saying that the upside is there's a huge upside still.
For cryptocurrency in general, I would agree with him.
Right.
All right?
Okay.
But for Bitcoin as a specific, because even now there are several types of cryptocurrency even now. You don't have to go to Bitcoin. There are other, go look there. You don't have to go to Bitcoin. There are other, Bitcoin is the most well-known because it has become the most widely used, I suppose.
We could start a rod of iron Bitcoin, couldn't we?
We could.
Rod of iron cryptocurrency.
Absolutely, yes. But please don't make your tithe in rod of iron cryptocurrency.
Okay.
We will figure out a way to accept Bitcoin. Although if we do accept Bitcoin, we will turn it into cash as quickly, dollar currency as quickly as possible. But at least that's how I would advise the financial committee. But for now, let's deal with what the central banks give us for now, anyway. But I'm sure that in the future, this is how we're going up against four horsemen, right?
Right.
We're going up against China. We're going up against Islam, and we're going up against the international bankers and financial institutions. Yes. And
Vatican.
And this is how, and this is one of the ways in which God, true Father, is fighting those four horsemen of the apocalypse, which is great, but let's not get killed in the process. Let's not be an innocent victim. All right. So, like I say, God is fighting Islam. All right. So don't be a victim of that fight. So don't go to Times Square this New Year's Eve.
Okay.
I'm telling you to stay away from Times Square.
It's a big event in London. Well, a big crowd on.
I'm sure in every Thames. I'm sure that radical Islam is going to Islamist terrorists are going to find concentrations of targets across the world. And I'm very concerned about how they may take advantage of that. So don't be a part of that concentration of targets, for crying out loud. All right. So anyway, let me go to my conglomerate media outlet, New York Times. They had an interview with the president, and I think we need to see what the president says about that. Because basically this was a very informal interview. It was not scheduled. President Trump played a round of golf, and basically after that he just sort of sat down with a New York Times reporter in the clubhouse for about a half an hour, and they talked about things. We don't have a transcript, but we do have the New York Times reporter's report of that conversation, and so let's go through it. I think I've been through it once, and I think it's rather interesting. All right, it's out of West Palm Beach, Florida. And, you know, the New York Times, you can read the New York Times, but you have to know how to read the New York Times. Really? Okay, so you just have to be aware. President Trump said Thursday that he believes Robert S. Mueller, the special counsel in the Russia investigation, will treat him fairly, contradicting some members of his party who have waged a weeks-long campaign to try to discredit Mr. Mueller and his continuing inquiry. During an impromptu 30-minute interview with the New York Times at his golf club in West Palm Beach, the president did not demand an end to the Russia investigation swirling around his administration. See, swirling around, that's part of the New York Times aspect there, you see. Okay. They want to present the Trump administration as being in trouble. Right. They got storm clouds. They got controversy swirling around. But anyway, so know how to read the New York Times, right? Okay. But insisted 16 times that there has been no collusion discovered by the inquiry. Quote, it makes the country look bad, very bad, and it puts the country in a very bad position, unquote, Mr. Trump said of the investigation. So the sooner it's worked out, the better it is for the country, unquote. Asked whether he would order the Justice Department to reopen the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, Mr. Trump appeared to remain focused on the Russia investigation. Quote, I have absolute right to do what I want to do with the Justice Department, unquote, he said, echoing claims by his supporters that as president he has the power to open or end an investigation. Quote, but for purposes of hopefully thinking I'm going to be treated fairly, I've stayed uninvolved with this particular matter, unquote. Hours after he accused the Chinese of secretly shipping oil to North Korea, Mr. Trump explicitly said for the first time that he has, quote, been soft, unquote, on China on trade in hopes that its leaders will pressure North Korea to abandon its nuclear weapons program. And I think President Trump has the right idea here, that eventually it has to be China that solves the Korean Peninsula. And think about it from China's point of view, all right? So China will only act on this if they see it as in their interest. So how do you show them that it is in their interest? That's the job of diplomacy. Right. To get people to do what you want them to do because they see it as being in their own interest. Right. That's the job of the diplomat. That's what people go to, you know, these expensive schools of government and so forth, the Kennedy School. So if the diplomats wanted to do that, they would be focused on that. They would go to the Chinese and say, look, think about what it would mean if the United States goes to war against North Korea. All right? Think about what that means. Think about what it would be like for you if you wake up one morning and find the U.S. 8th Army stationed on the southern bank of the Yalu River. Think about that for a while, Mr. Xi Jinping. Yeah. Think about that for a while. It's not going to be like it was in 1950, all right? 1950. You're not going to be able to send hordes of people across the Yalu River to try and push us back. It's not going to be that easy. Think about that. The U.S. 8th Army on the southern bank in Xinhuiju and other cities, and they're all along the Yalu River and along the Tumen River. Do you want that? If you don't, then maybe you should be the one to solve this problem. Yeah. Because if you leave it up to us, all right, no, we'll make promises. We want to do regime change, anything like that. But North Korea is a house of cards. We know that. You know that. And the North Koreans know that. It's a house of cards. If you remove one card, the whole thing's going to come tumbling down. So any kind of intervention, military intervention in North Korea is likely to bring down the North Korean government because it's so unstable. And even if we promise not to do regime change, the regime is going to change on its own. It's going to collapse on its own. And we're there, and you're not. So what will that happen? Now, having said that, all right, when I think about what Father wants,
right,
Father does not want the Chinese in North Korea. All right, so I may be going against Father on this. And he's in charge, after all, so what I say, what I want, doesn't really matter. But I'm just saying.
But we're just speculating here.
We're just, well, you know, Father, it's beyond speculation that Father does not want the Chinese in North Korea.
No.
That's not speculation. That's actually, yeah. I think we can be pretty sure that Father does not want the Chinese in North Korea. So, thy will be done. Thy will be done, not my will.
Do you think China's gotten that message yet?
Well, Chinese communists are very intelligent people, and they've been dealing with Korea for 5,000 years.
Right.
And they can look back on their history, and they can see how previous attempts to attack the Korean Peninsula have sometimes led to the demise of a dynasty.
Right.
FYI, you know, you can look at the Sui dynasty of, what was it, 4th century, I think. I'm not sure right now. Where they sent a 1,000,000-man army against what is now North Korea, the Goguryeo kingdom. And, I mean, think about what the population was like back then, you know, what the population of that Goguryeo kingdom was back then, perhaps in the hundreds of thousands or something like that, and you're sending a 1,000,000-man, I mean, that would be like sending, 10 million, I don't know what it would be like today. And the Koreans managed to rout that army.
Wow.
Yes. But in order to raise that army, the Chinese had to tax their people so heavily that it led to the demise of the dynasty, which is why the Sui dynasty is not very well known today. It was very short-lived. But anyway, so the Chinese know about, all right, they know all this history. And so that may be one of the reasons that they're reluctant to deal directly with North Korea. I don't know. Because to them, North Korea is just it's a snake pit, I think is how they would how they see North Korea. But anyway, yeah. So what Father, I'm sure, is very much in charge, and I think in 2018 something will come. But let's not diverge too far away from
one thing real
this
quick
interview.
On this point, on the Freedom Society Thursday night, very interesting. We saw a video on The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It was very, very interesting because it was in the context of American military action, particularly Vietnam, and it sort of went through various scenarios and showed how Sun Tzu would do it, and a lot of it had to do with deep thought, intelligence, choosing your places to attack, strategy. And if you look at the American style, I mean, he made a couple of points. One was the Battle of Gettysburg on Cemetery Ridge when Robert E. Lee decided to attack. There was Pickett's charge and that whole scenario, which was just suicidal and, you know, total carnage. The point being made that General Longstreet had advised General Lee to avoid Cemetery Ridge, to take the troops and bring them to Washington, D.C., so that they wouldn't have to fight the troops on the high ground, which is suicidal. But Lee was insistent upon doing that, perhaps for ideological reasons, perhaps for sentimental reasons, who knows. But the end result was that they lost that battle. So it seems that Trump, we have a president, really an unusual Western president, who really kind of knows the art of negotiation, certainly that, but also translating in the art of war. We're actually in war now.
Yes.
And we see how President Trump is dealing with the various enemies. So I think that that's a hopeful sign.
Yes.
With the scenario in Korea, that we have a president like this. We don't know. God might surprise us.
Well, I mean, Chinese obviously have read Sun Tzu as well. And, the basic premise of Sun Tzu is that you, as much as possible, win your wars without fighting. Mm-hmm. And if you have to fight, pick the time and place that is most advantageous to you. Mm-hmm. I think those are the very basic principles of Sun Tzu. And both sides are trying to do that. Mm-hmm. And again, for the Chinese, the best time to fight the United States is not now. It is perhaps in a couple of years. And the best place to fight the Americans is probably not on the Korean Peninsula. It may be in the South China Sea or something, because they've built themselves a very advantageous position there. I don't know where it would be, but already the United States and China have already fought one war on the Korean Peninsula, and actually the Chinese were pretty successful in that war. I'm referring to what's called the Korean War, but actually it was the first war between the United States and China, effectively. Right. Because the North Korean military was subsumed by the Chinese in October of 1950, and the South Korean military was subsumed by the Americans pretty much in July of 1950. So after the initial sort of conflicts and things like that, it became a war between China and the United States. And China was pretty successful because it was able to push the Americans back from the Yalu River down to where the military demarcation line and the DMZ are located now. Overall, it was a draw. The war was a draw, but that was, but the Chinese came into it when the North Koreans basically had been defeated, and they sort of created they snatched a draw from the jaws of defeat. Right. So for them, I think it was a victory. But I don't think that they would want to fight the United States again on the Korean Peninsula. Maybe they will. I don't know. But anyway, something will happen in the Korean Peninsula in 2018, and I believe that Father will be in charge. Anyway, let's get back to this where he. Hours after he accused Chinese of secretly shipping oil to North Korea, Mr. Trump explicitly said for the first time that he has been soft on China on trade in hopes of its leaders will pressure North Korea to abandon its nuclear weapons program. He hinted that his patience may soon end, however, signaling his frustration with the reported oil shipments. And by the way, this morning we have a report that Russia also has been sending oil to North Korea in violation of the Security Council resolution.
Is anyone talking to those Russians, Tim?
I hope they will. As we sit here, I believe someone is talking to those Russians, yes. Oil is going into North Korea. That wasn't my deal, he exclaimed, raising the possibility of aggressive trade actions against China. If they don't help us with North Korea, then I do what I've always said I want to do. Despite saying that when he visited China, despite saying that when he visited in China in November, Mr. Xi Jinping treated me better than anybody's ever been treated in the history of China. Mr. Trump said that they have to help us much more. Okay, well, China has a long history. Anyway, we'll not fact-check that too closely. We have a nuclear menace out there, which is no good for China, he said. And that's a point. And that's the point I think that he's trying to drive home to the Chinese, that this is also your problem. It's not just our problem. By the way, Chinese caused the problem, or had a very big part in causing the problem. Russia, too. Mr. Trump gave the interview in the grill room of Trump International Golf Club after he ate lunch with his playing partners, including his son Eric and the pro golfer Jim Herman. No aides were present for the interview, and the president sat alone with a New York Times reporter at a large round table as club members chatted and ate lunch nearby. So it was a very informal setting. Yeah. A few times, members and friends, including a longtime supporter, Christopher Ruddy, the president and chief executive of the conservative website and TV company Newsmax, came by to speak with Mr. Trump, noting that he had given Mr. Herman $50,000 years ago when he worked at the president's New Jersey Golf Club and was trying to make the PGA Tour. Mr. Trump asked him how much he made playing on the professional circuit. It's like $3 million, Mr. Herman said, which to him is like making $1 billion, because he doesn't spend anything, Mr. Trump joked. Ain't that a great story? In the interview, the president touted the strength of his campaign victories and his accomplishments in office, including passage of a tax overhaul this month. But he also expressed frustration and anger at Democrats who, he said, refused to negotiate on legislation. Like Joe Manchin, Mr. Trump said, referring to the Democratic senator from West Virginia. He said Mr. Manchin and other Democrats claim to be centrists, but refuse to negotiate on health care or taxes. Quote, he talks, but he doesn't do anything. He doesn't do, quote, unquote, Mr. Trump said, hey, let's get together. Let's do bipartisan. I say, good, let's go. Then you don't hear from him again. Nonetheless, Mr. Trump said he still hoped Democrats will work with him on bipartisan legislation in the coming year to overhaul health care, improve the country's crumbling infrastructure, and help young immigrants brought to the country as children. During the coming year, of course, this 2018 is going to be a midterm election year,
yes.
And the Democrats have a decision to make. Mm-hmm. Are they going to continue their never Trump? We're not going to support anything, not a single vote for anything that Trump supports. This has been their policy until now, all right? And the gambit on that, or the gambit on that is that, okay, Trump is going to fail. Mm-hmm. His legislation is going to fail, and we will reap windfall profits from that, and we will get seats in the House of Representatives as a result of that. We will take over the House, and then we will impeach Trump. That's the plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As they're going along, is that going to happen? For example, Nancy Pelosi said that the tax bill is the worst bill ever to be worst bill ever,
anyone
right?
Ever in the history of mankind.
History of mankind and womankind as well.
Okay.
Let's be politically correct here, right?
Okay, sorry.
I'm joking. So now, if that's true, then okay, yeah, they'll get what they want. But what happens if the Americans actually start getting more money in their pocket and in their paychecks? If the unemployment continues to fall. Already the Fed is saying that they expect the unemployment to keep falling to about, right now it was most recently 4.1%. They expect in 2018 that will fall to 3.9%. That was the Fed's expectation. What if it's, actually happens, or if it even goes lower than that? More people have jobs. Food stamps and welfare even go lower and lower and lower. And people start saying, hey, you know what? I think I might be able to move off the plantation.
Yeah.
What happens then?
Buy a house.
Whoa. Then what happens to the Democrats'
Maybe I
plan?
can buy some land around here, Tim.
Yeah.
Build a house.
Yeah. So the Democrats have to make a decision. Are we going to continue in this full court press anti-Trump strategy? Or are we going to start... Or are the voters going to want us to start negotiating and talking to Trump? They have to. They will make their decision. They're smart people. I'm sure they've read Sun Tzu as well.
You think?
I think they have. Yes. Nevertheless, Mr. Trump said he still hoped Democrats will work with him on bipartisan legislation. So the president is wisely saying that I'm ready to talk when they're ready to talk. So he's already taking the high ground, you see. So that's very wise, I think. Because I think the Democrats will actually feel pressure to start talking and start working with the president.
Attack the high ground at your peril, Tim.
Yes. Mr. Trump disputed reports that suggested he does not have a detailed understanding of legislation, saying, I know the details of taxes better than anybody, better than the greatest CPA. I know the details of health care better than most. Later, he added that he knows more about the big bills debated in the Congress than any president that's ever been in office.
Sounds like the Democrats.
The president also spoke at length about the special election this month in Alabama, where Roy S. Moore, the Republican candidate, lost to a Democrat after being accused of sexual misconduct with young girls, including a minor, when he was in his 30s. Mr. Trump said that he supported Mr. Moore's opponent in the Republican primary race because he knew Mr. Moore would lose in the general election, and he insisted that he endorsed Mr. Moore later only because, quote, I feel I have to endorse Republicans as the head of the party, unquote. Mr. Mueller's investigation appears to be moving ahead despite predictions by Mr. Trump's lawyers this year that it would be over by Thanksgiving. Mr. Trump said that he was not bothered by the fact that he does not know when it will be completed because he has nothing to hide. Mr. Trump repeated his assertion that Democrats invented the Russia allegations, quote, as a hoax, as a ruse, as an excuse for losing an election, unquote. He said that everybody knows, in quotes, his associates did not collude with the Russians, even as he insisted that the real stories are about Democrats who worked with Russians during the 2016 campaign. Quote, there's no collusion, but I think he's going to be fair, unquote, Mr. Trump said of Mr. Mueller. And this is the point where Roger Stone was making on the King's video, the King's Report video yesterday, from the InfoWars, I think, where Roger Stone said, no, they're not going to be fair.
Right.
They're not going to be fair. And that he's saying that the deep state, which Mueller represents, hates Trump. Viscerally hates Trump. And I explained at the beginning why that is because, this class of elites, the neo-aristocrats, believe that they are entitled to rule the world as Xi Jinping is ruling China. And Trump is the antithesis, all right? And in their Marxist theology, thesis and antithesis do not get along.
No.
They struggle, there's class struggle, and there's fight, and then there's a synthesis that comes in. This is basic Marxist theology, all right? Theology. This is basic Marxist theology. And so it is their mission in life to destroy, as the antithesis, as the thesis, it is their mission in life to destroy the antithesis so that a new synthesis can be born.
Okay.
All right? So they know this from their seminary, Marxist seminaries. It's Marxist Theology 101.
Are they seminaries in Beijing then?
Yes, it's called the People's University of or Beijing or something like that. Beijing University, actually. So anyway, Roger Stone says that Trump is wrong on this.
Right.
Right.
I did hear that. Yeah.
Okay. So I have to. We hope that Roger Stone's message gets through.
He's particularly upset with Trump's lawyers. They're advising him incorrectly, according to Roger Stone.
Trump is not a dummy.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, let's see. In recent weeks, Republican lawmakers, you got me thinking about lawyers. In recent weeks, Republican lawmakers have seized on anti-Trump texts sent by an FBI investigator who was removed from Mr. Mueller's team as evidence of political bias. At a hearing this month, Representative Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, said that the public trust in this whole thing is gone. Although Mr. Trump has said he believes Mr. Mueller will treat him fairly, Mr. Trump raised questions about how the special counsel had dealt with the lobbyist Tony Podesta. Mr. Podesta is the brother of Mrs. Clinton's campaign chairman, John D. Podesta, and Tony Podesta is under investigation for work his firm, the Podesta Group, did on behalf of a client referred to it in 2012 by Paul Manafort, the former Trump campaign chairman. Whatever happened to Podesta, Mr. Trump said. They closed their firm. They left in disgrace, the whole thing, and now you never heard of it. You never heard of anything. Mr. Trump tried to put distance between himself and Mr. Manafort, who was indicted in October. The president said that Mr. Manafort, whom he called a very nice man and an honorable person, had spent more time working for other candidates and presidents than for him. Quote, Paul only worked for me a few months, Mr. Trump said. Paul worked for Ronald Reagan. His firm worked for John McCain, worked for Bob Dole, worked for many Republicans far longer than he worked for me. And you're talking about what Paul was many years ago before I ever heard of him. He worked for me, 3.5 months, unquote. Mr. Trump said it was too bad that Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, recused himself from overseeing the Russia investigation. Mr. Trump did not directly answer a question about whether he thought that Eric H. Holder Jr., President Barack Obama's first Attorney General, was more loyal than Mr. Sessions had been. Quote, I don't want to get into loyalty, but I will tell you that I will say this. Holder protected President Obama, totally protected him. That's correct.
That's true.
Unquote. Mr. Trump said, he added, when you look at the things that they did, and Holder protected the president, and I have great respect for that, I'll be honest. Mr. Trump said he believes members of the news media will eventually cover him more favorably because they are profiting from the interest in his presidency and thus will want him reelected. Quote, another reason I'm going to win another 4 years is because newspapers, television, all forms of media will tank if I'm not there, because without me, their ratings are going down the tubes, Mr. Trump says.
This is with the New York Times reporter. This is part of the interview.
Yes. Then invoked one of his preferred insults. Without me, the New York Times will indeed be not the failing New York Times, but the failed New York Times. Past tense, boy. He added, quote, so they basically have to let me win. And eventually, probably 6 months before the election, they'll be loving me because they're saying, please, please, don't lose Donald Trump. Okay. After the interview, Mr. Trump walked out of the grill room, stopping briefly to speak to guests. He then showed off a plaque that listed the club's golf champions. Okay, we'll finish this final paragraph, including several years in which Mr. Trump had won its annual tournament. Asked how far he was hitting balls off the tee these days, Mr. Trump, who will turn 72 next year, was modest. Quote, gets shorter every year, unquote, he said.
I heard he hit like 280, 300 off the tee.
I don't know.
He's quite a good golfer, actually.
Mm.
I saw a little.
Apparently, he won the championship for several years in a row.
Well, it depends on the level of the club, but I did actually see him hitting a drive off the tee, and got a good swing. Hits it a long way. But Trump's a winner, Tim. Mm-hmm. And winners do that kind of thing.
Yes.
We got some winners around here. I met Helmut yesterday. Mm-hmm. You know, our brother, our friend Helmut, who does the... he was on the King's Report, yeah.
Yes, and he has helped us in many ways. He's runs a printing company, or he works for a printing company that prints all our stuff, and he has helped us in many ways aside from that. But anyway,
he's a beautiful guy. Man.
Go ahead with your story.
Helmut's a winner. Mm-hmm. You know, Helmut was a headmaster at a school.
Yes.
I think he started out in engineering or something, but then shifted to education. He was a football coach, like a soccer coach.
Yes. And
I recall on the King's Report, he was talking about his life course, and in every instance, he won. Mm-hmm. Like his football teams went up and won the state championship. And his school went out and excelled. And people like that, Tim, winners, are walking through the doors of the sanctuary. It's like we said last week. Remember, we were talking about the NBA?
And Helmut, by the way, is a very strong Christian.
Very strong Christian.
And a person who basically exemplifies Christian character.
Yeah, he's a beautiful brother. And I met him yesterday. It was lovely. We wish him a happy new year. But we were talking last week about the NBA. Players only. The idea of players only, okay?
I remember that, yes.
The guys that are in the ring, like Teddy Roosevelt said, the credit belongs to the guy who's in the ring, the guy who gets on the mat, the guy who dies to himself. Those are the winners. And that to me that's my personal motto for 2018 for the Sanctuary Church, for my commitment to the Sanctuary Church. Players only. Whenever I walk through that gate, hey, I have to come in with the right attitude, die to myself, living as an offering, attending the King, attending the providence of God. And, hey, it was great seeing Helmut yesterday.
He's always a good person to talk to.
But that's an example of, to me, Helmut's an example of the many hundreds and thousands of Helmuts and people like us, like them, who are just ready to become part of God's kingdom, to join the Rod of Iron ministry. And that will be the story of 2018 when we're here 1 year from today. God willing, you and I.
Yes. Let's do one more Trump story before we go to break, and that is the war between Trump and Amazon. That's the coming war between Trump and Amazon, we hope. Okay. Yeah, this is because Amazon is a monopoly that needs to be taken down. The king has said this, and he's right. This is about the subsidy that Amazon is receiving by not having to pay what it should pay for the packages that it ships, and this explains it. And Trump talks about this. Trump says Amazon should pay much more to ship packages, as he claims current deal makes web giant and foe Jeff Bezos richer, while the Postal Service loses money. This is some of the subheadlines. President renews ongoing feud with Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. The billionaire web executive also owns the Washington Post, which Trump sees as perpetually unfair to him. Trump says Amazon should be paying more to ship its packages to consumers. The company lost $7.2 billion on shipping in 2016, but the Postal Service has posted overall losses for 11 straight years. Citicorp analysis found that the USPS systematically underestimates its shipping infrastructure costs, resulting in the equivalent of a $1.46 discount on every box.
Wow.
You see? That's the Citicorp saying that. So that was the summary of the article. Donald Trump opened up a new chapter in his running feud with Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos on Friday, saying the United States Postal Service should be charging the online shopping giant more for shipping. Why is the United States Postal Office, which is losing many billions of dollars a year while charging Amazon and others so little to deliver their packages, making Amazon richer and the post office dumber and poorer? The president asked on Twitter. Should be charging much more. President Trump's jab at Amazon's bottom line is a continuation of his long-standing battle with Bezos, who also owns the Washington Post. The Post, one of the newspapers Trump most loves to hate, has drawn his ire since early in the presidential campaign for generating negative coverage of the Republican. The USPS has posted losses for 11 straight years, largely on the basis of gigantic legacy pension and health care costs. And while online shopping has led to growth in its package delivery business, fewer Americans send letters via first-class mail every year. Federal regulators moved recently to allow bigger jumps to stamp prices beyond the rate of inflation, which could eventually increase companies' shipping rates. Amazon, on the other hand, has the markings of an unstoppable juggernaut, and one analysis shows that the Postal Service is giving it a free ride. An April report from Citicorp found that the fast pace of changing in the shipping business has left the USPS struggling to allocate its expenses correctly. Bureaucrats have fixed the share of infrastructure costs associated. See, bureaucrats.
Right.
That's the red flag word there.
Mm-hmm.
Bureaucrats have fixed the share of infrastructure costs associated with packages at 5.5%. But the package shipments now make up 25% of the USPS's business. You see? So what they've done is that they take the infrastructure costs, all right? These are costs, building costs and other infrastructure costs. They say, okay, how are we going to allocate this? And that will determine how much they charge for first-class mail and how much they charge for packages. And they said, okay, packages, we're going to assign 5.5% of infrastructure costs to packages.
Right.
Now, maybe at that time that they set that number, maybe that was close to the truth. But the problem is today, that's not even close to the truth. They should be allocating 25% of those costs to packages. That would make the package postal rates much higher. And so, and Amazon, to be fair, is not the only one to be receiving this, but Amazon is the one that is really, really taking advantage of this.
Yeah.
So they say, okay, well, USPS is going to charge less than because USPS is basically giving them a postal rate that does not even cover the real costs of delivering the packages. So
it's just a subsidy, really.
It is a subsidy. And President Trump is pointing this out, and he understands this because he's a businessman. And so he's saying Amazon should be paying a lot more. So for factoring in the actual expenses associated with delivering more packages than their price model allows for, boxes should cost postal customers $1.46 more than they do on average, right? Building the equivalent of a government subsidy into the final price. All right, so right now, because the government is covering those losses, it's a government subsidy. It's as if every Amazon box comes with $1 or $2 stapled to the packing slip, a gift card from Uncle Sam, a Wall Street Journal commentator wrote in June. Amazon acquired Whole Foods Markets in August, pushing its third quarter revenue to $43.7 billion. Amazon's stock price has jumped by 23% in the last 90 days, yet the company continues to see shipping as a loss leader, reporting that it lost $7.2 billion shipping packages in 2016. Consumers can receive free 2-day shipping on most items by paying for a $99 annual Prime membership. Some of those packages arrive via USPS, but many are sent through UPS and FedEx. Even with the cost of shipping, Amazon posted an overall profit of $2.4 billion in 2016, up from $596 million a year earlier. Overall profit of $2.4 billion in 2016, up from $596 million. So about $600 million to $2.4 billion. So that's quadrupling. That's approximately quadrupling the profit over 2016. And Amazon says, "Hey, we're losing money on shipping. All right, well, charge more for your Prime membership or whatever. That's you don't have to give free shipping." Mm-hmm. And maybe if you charge more for your Prime membership, maybe fewer people will subscribe to it, and fewer people will use Amazon, and that would be a good thing.
Yeah, it would be. But I think also the normal customer is paying through the nose. Like I sent some Christmas cards to England. Mm-hmm. I just took 10 Christmas cards
right.
to send to my relatives there and put it in a priority mail package, like a normal A5 package.
Yes.
It cost me $60 to send that to England.
Okay. Let me give you a hint.
Yeah?
Do you know anybody in Singapore?
I might if I looked.
Send your Christmas cards next year
in
a package
to
Singapore.
Right.
And have someone in Singapore send them to the UK.
Would it be cheaper than $60?
Work it out. I bet you it'll be cheaper, yes. We had a conference one time in Japan, and a participant from Singapore thought that she would beat the system. She had a lot of newsletters or something like that she was sending to people in Japan for her nonprofit organization. So she brought all her newsletters saying, okay, I'm going to send this by domestic mail in Japan. She wound up paying much more than if she had sent them from Singapore.
Really?
Because different governments deal with the postal rates in different ways. All right, so and some governments, apparently Singapore, at least at that time, check it out. I don't know if it's still true today, but at that time, Singapore, their international mail was heavily subsidized for some reason. I don't know. All right, so if you were sending something to Japan, actually, it would cost less to send it from Singapore than if you were to take it to Japan and send it by domestic mail. Mail rates are crazy. Mail rates are crazy.
It's really kind of weird because you always think that this special relationship between England and the United States, but actually the mail rates are huge. It takes a long time to get there, like 7 days, 10 days. And it's like, what's up with this special relationship? That doesn't look so special. I mean,
hey, we fought a war over that. I don't know. International mail is a strange thing, and I know in the past some governments used to open each and every letter and check them. But anyway, we don't know what's going on. But there's a lot more evil in the world going on than what we're aware of. I'll tell you that much. All right, let's take a break. Let's take our 5-minute break now, and we'll start the 7 o'clock hour 5 minutes from now. Okay? See you in a minute, or 5. Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, December 30th, 2017, the final King's Report of this Gregorian year. Tim Elder and Ted O'Grady in for the second king of Chanuguk, Hyung Jin-moon. And during this hour, I want to start this hour with what's going on in Iran.
Okay.
Something's happening there.
Yep.
Price protests turn political in Iran as rallies spread. This is a Reuters article, updated 10 hours ago, it says. This is coming out of Dubai, which is not a part of Iran, but so they're covering it from outside Iran. Demonstrators chanted anti-government slogans in several cities across Iran on Friday, Iranian news agencies and social media reports said, as price protests turned into the largest wave of demonstrations since the nationwide pro-reform unrest in 2009. Police dispersed anti-government demonstrations in the western city of Kermanshah as protests spread to Tehran and several other cities a day after rallies in the northeast, the semi-official news agency Fars said. The outbreak of unrest reflects growing discontent over rising prices and alleged corruption, as well as concern about the Islamic Republic's costly involvement in regional conflicts such as those in Syria and Iraq. An official said a few protesters had been arrested in Tehran, and footage posted on social media showed a heavy police presence in the capital and some other cities. Of course, the reason that we're interested in Iran and the situation in Iran is that it is a major player in the Middle East situation right now. They support Hezbollah, which has a large role in Lebanon and in other areas of the country, and they are the arch rival of Saudi Arabia, and the two countries are the two regional superpowers, and there's concern over the possibility of war breaking out between those two already. Forces in Yemen that are supported by Iran have tried to, or have actually fired missiles against Saudi Arabia. One apparently was directed at the Saudi Arabian, or the airport of Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, and the other was actually apparently aimed at the royal palace of Saudi Arabia. Both of these were knocked down by U.S. Patriot missiles. Mm-hmm. Thank goodness we know that they work. Nice. But that situation appears to be escalating. And so on that backdrop, we have this situation developing domestically in Iran right now. And so we don't know if that's going to lead to further escalation of the tensions, if the Tehran government wants to solidify their support by sort of directing the opposition outwardly towards Saudi Arabia, or if these demonstrations will escalate to the point where the current regime in Iran crumbles. We don't know what's going to happen there, so we need to keep track. Washington condemned the arrests. The Iranian government should respect their people's rights, including their right to express themselves. A White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders said in a statement. The U.S. State Department, in a separate statement, urged all nations to publicly support the Iranian people and their demands for basic rights and an end to corruption. About 300 demonstrators gathered in Kermanshah after what Fars said was a, quote, call by the anti-revolution, unquote. They shouted, quote, political prisoners should be freed, and freedom or death. Where have I heard that before? Freedom or death. And some public
give me liberty or give me death.
Yes, some public property was destroyed. Fars did not name any opposition groups. The protests in Kermanshah, the main city in a region where an earthquake killed over 600 people in November, took place a day after hundreds rallied in Iran's second-largest city, Mashhad, to protest at high prices and shout anti-government slogans. Videos posted on social media showed demonstrators yelling, quote, "The people are begging. The clerics act like God," unquote. Fars said there were protests in the cities of Sari and Rasht in the north, Kazvin west of Tehran, and Qom south of the capital, and also in Hamadan in western Iran. It said many marchers who wanted to raise economic demands left the rallies after demonstrators shouted political slogans.
Sounds like a sovereignty revolution, Tim.
Well, so this is the innate desire for freedom that God has put in us.
Yes.
and like the Trump supporters last year, now apparently this happened in 2009 as well, but you cannot completely put it down. It keeps coming up and coming up and coming up again and again and again. State television said annual nationwide rallies and events were scheduled for Saturday to commemorate pro-government demonstrations held in 2009 to counter protests by reformists. The Revolutionary Guards, which along with its Basij militia spearheaded a crackdown against the protesters in 2009, said in a statement carried by the state media that there were efforts to repeat that year's unrest, but added, quote, "The Iranian nation will not allow the country to be hurt," unquote. See, the establishment. Right. The establishment will fight back. So,
the mullahs.
Yes. Well, the people who were their establishment. The Mohsen Naj Hamadani, deputy secretary chief in Tehran province, said about 50 people had rallied in a square, but most had left after being asked to by police, while a few who refused were, quote, temporarily detained.
Okay.
The ILNA news agency reported. In a central city of Isfahan, a resident said protesters had joined a rally held by factory workers demanding back pay. Back pay. Can't pay their workers. Quote, the slogans quickly changed from the economy to those against President Hassan Rouhani and the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, unquote, the resident said by telephone. In Qom, a stronghold of the Shiite clergy, footage posted on social media showed protesters attacking Ayatollah Khamenei by name. Sayyid Ali should be ashamed and leave the country alone, they chanted. The protests were held also in the town of Kuchan near the Turkish-Turkmen border and in Avaz, capital of oil-rich Khuzestan province, social media and Iranian news websites reported. Police arrested 52 people in Thursday's protests. Fars quoted a judicial official as saying in Mashhad, one of the holiest places in Shiite Islam. In social media footage, which could not be authenticated, riot police were seen using water cannon and tear gas to disperse crowds. Openly political protests are rare in Iran, where security services are omnipresent. The last unrest of national significance occurred in 2009 when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's re-election as president ignited 8 months of street protests. Pro-reform rivals said the vote was rigged. However, demonstrations are often held by workers over layoffs or non-payment of salaries, and by people who hold deposits in non-regulated, bankrupt financial institutions. Prominent conservative cleric Ayatollah Ahmad Alamohoda called earlier for tough action against the protests. If the security and law enforcement agencies leave the rioters to themselves, enemies will publish films and pictures in their media and say that the Islamic Republic system has lost its revolutionary base in Mashhad. Well, we wouldn't want that, would we? The state enemies posting film, yeah. No. The state news agency IRNA quoted the man as saying, some social media videos show demonstrators chanting "Death to Rouhani" and "Death to the dictator." Protests were also held in at least 2 other northeastern cities. Ala Mohada, the representative of Ayatollah Khamenei in Mashhad, said a few people had taken advantage of Thursday's protests against rising prices to chant slogans against Iran's role in regional conflicts. Tehran backs Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in his country's civil war, Shiite militias in Iraq, Houthi rebels in Yemen, and Lebanon's powerful Hezbollah group. Some people have come to express their demands, but suddenly, in a crowd of hundreds, a small group that did not exceed 50 shouted deviant and horrendous slogans such as "Let go of Palestine," "Not Gaza, not Lebanon," "I'd give my life only for Iran." Alamohoda said, "Well, that's not good."
Yeah, we're Iranians.
Make Iran great again.
Yeah, make Iran great again. But this might be the beginning of the end.
Could be
of the Islamic State. But I mean, isn't it so ironic, Tim? You remember back when the Shah of Iran was head of Iran. I mean, Iranians are very intelligent, highly developed people. Had been a prosperous country, and it's surprising to me that the so-called Islamic Revolution has survived as long as it has in Iran. I mean, we have some members in our church, Iranian members.
Yes.
They're wonderful people. Why is that, Tim? How is this persisting so long?
Well, you could say, how is it that the North Korean regime could survive for so long? How could the Chinese regime survive for so long? It's because, fundamentally, the people let it survive. All right? I was in South Korea when it was under a military dictatorship, when, and there were these protests going on from time to time. And there was a turning point, and I think that turning point, to me, as I was there, it came in 1987, when basically the middle class, the office workers, and we had demonstrations where people were wearing their suits and ties.
Right. Okay.
When you see demonstrators wearing suits and ties, you know that the government is in trouble, because those are the people that really prop up. They're the producers, and they're the middle class. They're the ones who have they can afford the time and afford to lose a little bit of pay to go out and demonstrate.
Right.
And that was when the Korean people just at one point just collectively said no more in June 1987. And that was when the fundamental change. There was changes going on before then too, but that was when it really changed.
Yeah.
And that's what that is what has to happen. Also in Korea, the White House, the State Department were always issuing the statements. The Korean government should allow freedom of expression. Right, and all that, I suppose, plays a certain role. Primarily, I think, to appease the conscience of Americans. I think, but the change has to come from the people themselves.
Yeah.
Because they are the owners. Mm-hmm. They have to be the owners. All right, we have to be the owners of Cheongguk.
This is the message of the kingdom, isn't it?
They have to be the owners of Cheongguk. Only we are, whether we like it or not. Right. And sometimes we don't like it, but we are the owners.
The king was talking about that this week. That Jesus is not a totalitarian dictator.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Right. He expressed this week.
He's not a despot. Yes, not a despot.
He's tired of Christians coming and hearing the principle, coming to Father, and going back to our separate camps. Mm-hmm. He's holding up the Cheongguk Constitution. Mm-hmm. So this Constitution is the Constitution that God has given us to give us freedom and responsibility. On the micro, that's being called out. So we see the evidence on the macro. People's desire for freedom, in the end, cannot be controlled.
Yes, in the long term, it can be controlled, and it is controlled in the short term, but not in the long term, and certainly not in the last days. Social media videos also showed demonstrators chanting "Leave Syria, think about us," criticizing Iran's military and financial support for Assad. Vice President Eshaq Jahangiri, a close to Rouhani ally, suggested that hardline conservative opponents of the pragmatist president might have triggered the protests but lost control of them. Those who are behind such events will burn their own fingers, IRNA quoted Jahangiri as saying. Rouhani's leading achievement, a 2015 deal with world powers that curbed Iran's disputed nuclear program in return for a lifting of most international sanctions, has yet to bring the broad economic benefits the government says are coming. Unemployment stood at 12.4% in this fiscal year, according to the Statistical Center of Iran, up 1.4% from the previous year. And these, the government statistical centers are not necessarily objective.
That sounds kind of high.
It may be even higher. If the government says it's 12.4%, it could be 24%. We don't know. But anyway, that's what they're saying. About 3.2 million Iranians are jobless out of a total population of 80 million. So that is as much as we know about what is going on in Iran right now. As I said, Reuters is covering this, but they're covering from outside of Iran. They're covering it from Dubai, and it looks like they're reading the Iranian language websites, following the Twitter, whatever the people in Iran are tweeting, and it looks like they're also able to make some phone calls into Iran to interview people over their phone, which is something that reporters often do. but they're not able to actually be there, and they're not able to actually see this. So we hope that we can get more information about this, so that we can follow what's going on there, and we can maybe get an idea of where it's going to be going. Let's see. There's this coming back to the U.S. There's this situation that I see on Fox News this morning that causes me some concern, where apparently there's this thing called swatting.
Okay.
Swatting.
Swatting.
Yes. What swatting is when...
Parent smacks their child?
No. It's much more serious than that. Swatting is when two people get into an argument.
Okay.
And and one person will call 911 and say, "Oh, there's something going on at this address."
Okay.
And as a result of that call, 911 sends a SWAT team out to that address.
Right.
And in this case, in Kansas City, the SWAT team actually went to the house of an unarmed person where there were no weapons in the house,
Right.
based on a call that there was a hostage situation going on there, that someone had been killed there. It was totally a lie, all right? Someone had been killed, and there was someone there holding hostage, as other family members were being held hostage, something like that. So they went, and they knocked on the door, sort of, and then the man came to the door, and he, during the conversation or something like that, he reached for his waistband, and so the sniper immediately shot and killed him. When there was actually nothing going on. There was no need for the SWAT team to be there in the first place, but they were there, and they killed a man. There are two stories now, because now the person who made that call has also been arrested. So that's the most recent story. But let me back up a bit here and read the initial story about how this whole thing came about. Kansas police investigate whether fatal shooting was a result of prank called, quote, swatting, unquote. And I'm concerned about this because, we always have to be watching out for how evil attacks us, and this appears to be a new way in which evil attacks us. So we have to be aware that this kind of a thing can happen to us. Kansas officials and the FBI are investigating whether a fatal shooting by a police officer on Thursday was the grim outcome of a prank by video gamers. Officials said that the death of an unarmed man, whom family members identified as Andrew Finch, 28, at a home in Wichita, may have been the result of a hoax called swatting. As defined by 911.gov, swatting is, quote, false reporting an emergency to public safety by a person for the intent of getting a SWAT team response to a local location where no emergency exists, unquote. Wichita Deputy Police Chief Troy Livingston said Thursday's shooting, which he deemed a tragic and senseless act, happened when an officer was responding to a call from someone claiming his father had been shot in the head. The caller said he was holding his mother and a sibling at gunpoint, and noted he poured gasoline inside the home, and I might just set it on fire. This was all a lie. Okay, nothing like that happened. That was the information we were working off of, Livingston said, but the police believed it.
Right.
At least they acted on that information.
Well, they have to, really.
Police released, so that's the point here. Do they have to? Police released audio of the 911 call and also released a brief video of body camera footage at the scene. Supposedly responding to a hostage situation, police arrived at the home and, quote, got into position, unquote, Livingston said. Finch went to the front door, and after sporadically complying with, quote, several verbal commands, quote, to put his hands in the air, was shot by an officer who allegedly thought that Finch had drawn a weapon from his waistband. Finch later died at a hospital. He was not armed. There were no weapons in the house.
Right.
And the police were acting on completely false information. The deputy, by a person who had a grudge against this man, Finch, and who wanted to punish Finch by getting the SWAT team to respond to that address. And As a result, the man died. Finch died. The deputy police chief said Finch was not armed. Due to the actions of a prankster, we have an innocent victim, Livingston said at a Friday night news conference. He said no one has been arrested. Well, this is updated, and I'll read that story in a minute. Someone has been arrested now.
Okay.
In California.
California.
Yeah.
Okay.
A woman named Elisa Finch told the Wichita Eagle that her son, Andrew, was the victim. She said Andrew, who has 2 young children, walked to the door after hearing something, then screamed and was shot before family members were forced to go outside barefoot in the freezing cold and were cuffed. Lisa Finch added that her granddaughter was forced to step over her dying uncle and that no guns were found in the home. What gives the cops the right to open fire? Lisa Finch asked. The cop murdered my son over a false report in the first place. Andrew Finch's aunt, Lori Hernandez Caballero, called whoever made the false report to police a murderer, and I would agree with that. Yeah. I can't believe people do this on purpose, the aunt told the newspaper. Finch, described by his mother as a very kind and caring man who would do anything for his family, leaves behind 2 children, 2 and 7. The events that may have led to the fatal police shooting Thursday began with an online argument over a $2 wager in a, quote, Call for Duty game, a game called Call for Duty on UMG gaming-focused news service Dexterto reported. 2 players argued after losing a match, reportedly threatened to swat one another. UMG Vice President Shannon Garrison told the Associated Press that the company was doing everything we can to assist the authorities as they investigate the fatal shooting, and a Twitter account for the company said, "We woke this morning to horrible news about an innocent man losing his life. Our hearts go out to his loved ones." Yeah, always the hearts go out, right? But always after the fact. At Friday's news conference, Livingston didn't mention reports that the call may have stemmed from an argument over an online game. Livingston called the emergency call a little peculiar, as it went to a substation first, then it was relayed to a dispatch, then dispatch gave it to us. We have a lot of information to go through. The deputy chief added that detectives investigating the episode have so far found, quote, promising information, unquote. He added that while in general law enforcement is aware of swatting calls made to 911, calls made to 911 are based on the premise that someone is calling to get immediate help in an emergency. The officer who fired the shot, a 7-year veteran of the police force, has been placed on paid administrative leave, which is department policy. Kansas law makes some false emergency calls a felony that can be punished up to 13 months in prison for the first-time offender, although the presumed sentence is probation. Swatting, according to 911.gov, can be done via several techniques, including caller ID spoofing. Those making the false calls to law enforcement will often have a reasonable scenario and will sometimes include personal information. The FBI estimates that roughly 400 cases of swatting occur annually. An FBI supervisor in Kansas City, Missouri, which covers all of Kansas, said the agency joined in the investigation at the request of local police. In other cases of apparent swatting, 3 families in Florida in January had to evacuate their homes after a detective received an anonymous email bomb threat. A 20-year-old Maryland man was shot in the face with rubber bullets by police in 2015 after a fake hostage situation was reported at his home. Representative Catherine Clark, a Democrat of Massachusetts, introduced an anti-swatting bill in 2015, then was herself the victim of swatting. Armed officers in 2016 responded to an anonymous call claiming an active shooter was at her home. And let me just update you on the arrest.
Yeah.
Also on Fox, a 25-year-old man was arrested in South Los Angeles on Friday night in connection with an alleged swatting prank that resulted in a police-involved fatal shooting in Kansas, which was the story that I just read. Authorities identified the suspect as Tyler Barris of Los Angeles, KABC-TV reported. They say Barris is suspected of making a hoax telephone call to police in Wichita, Kansas, that resulted in the death of an innocent 28-year-old man. I think that's the only thing they add. Everything else is a repeat of the previous story. Yeah, so anyway, they have arrested a man in South Los Angeles for making this call to the police in Kansas City, which resulted in this tragic situation. So in every case like this, I think it's important that we think of the lessons that can be learned from this. Of course, in Cheonryuk, I don't know if we will have SWAT teams like this in Cheonryuk. Policing will be done by the local volunteers, the peace police. I think it will be much more difficult for this kind of a prank to exist in Cheonryuk.
They would be the local militia would know about the neighborhood. That's a huge difference. So
that certainly is.
So they would know who the guy is.
And if there's a hostage situation, let's say a hostage situation is going on next door.
Okay.
All right. How would the police respond to that? And there may be, hostage negotiation is a trained thing, and not everyone's going to be trained in that. And so there may be people who, presumably there will be people who have that training. There are people who are trained in that hostage negotiating now, and they can pass on their techniques to a certain groups of people. So not everyone will have that technique, and so someone like that will be called in. But this kind of a SWAT team, particularly with sharpshooters, and we had that other situation where video was released of an incident that happened some time ago, where a man in Arizona, I believe, was made to crawl.
It's Arizona, right?
Yeah, in Arizona, was made to crawl with his legs crossed, with his feet crossed, crawl forward, and then his pants were coming down, and so he reached to pull up his pants, and then and they shot him dead. And the police officer who did that was found innocent by in a trial, and it was after the trial that this video was released. So we have, I think, a problem with police violence. We have other stories of SWAT teams responding to the wrong address, for example, busting through a door, terrorizing children, killing pets, a dog or something like that, and then finding out that they were at the wrong address. This kind of thing we see those stories from time to time.
They just leave a few gift certificates with them on the way out the door?
I don't know if they'll probably not even do that. So we do have a problem with police violence. Of course, the black community is alleging that they're being killed right and left. Well, there's not that bad, but the whole Black Lives Matter thing is based on the idea that police are out to kill black people, and I don't think it's that bad. But there is a problem with police violence in general, which I think actually supports the idea that we need more peace police. We need more community policing, so we don't have to call in basically what are outside forces.
Yeah.
So in this case, this SWAT team arrived at that scene, and I would say that they acted prior to properly assessing the situation.
Yeah.
But of course, the information that they had, though, was that there was gasoline on the floor in the house, and that could be ignited at any moment. And so they would say we had to act quickly because our information was that lives were at stake. I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I'm just putting this on the table so that we can think about this. We can talk about this.
I think also, Tim, it's also a symptom of centralized power. Like after 9/11 with the Patriot Act and the change in the culture of America, and then all the propaganda subsequent to that on television, NCIS, SWAT team. There's a big show now called SWAT Team, and it's a glorification of this kind of hero figure who crosses the lines, knows what's right, doesn't respect due process, doesn't respect people's rights, and there's sort of an implicit acceptance of that in America today, which is different from the America that I grew up in.
Well, wait a second. Let me give you two words. Dirty Harry.
Yeah?
I mean, he was kind of the beginning of that, wasn't he?
Okay.
Yeah. Crossing lines.
Yeah, I know, but he just had he was a face-to-face guy.
he
wasn't a SWAT team guy.
He was not a SWAT team guy.
Sometimes
Yes.
the SWAT teams.
But I think what you say about the change in American culture, actually, that culture existed back then.
Well, we've always had a bit of a cowboy culture for sure. But we were deputized. That's the difference. I mean, Harry Callahan was a San Francisco cop, right?
Yes.
That was taking care of situations that maybe the cops in general couldn't. But also Harry Callahan confronted the corruption within the cops. Mm-hmm. So although we have a cowboy culture, we also have a culture, or have had a culture, of deputization, which I think is what we're bringing back in a way with the peace police, peace militia. But it just strikes me, coming back into this country after being out of this country for about 20 years, the big police cars everywhere. Like back in Woburn, Massachusetts, where I grew up, where we used to have friendly police cars and the friendly policemen. Now there's like big SUV tanks driving around the streets, and these guys, they're heavily armed, and it's intimidating, even though they're good guys. So there's kind of a situation where it's easier for this type of situation to happen. It's a bit easier for the police in that situation to act, maybe to pull the trigger more quickly.
One lesson we certainly do learn is that when you're dealing with the police, don't reach. Don't reach for your waistband. Do not reach, and be very careful. Yeah, I mean, and if you are going to, like for example, even there was what was it in where was it, Minnesota or someplace like that. This was a case where. And this was a black man who had been stopped and went for his wallet.
Yeah, right.
And the police shot him dead.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a situation came up here in Pennsylvania with myself. I was stopped by the police late at night, out on a rural road driving home, and I just stopped on the side of the road to do texting. So he came to my car. He was reasonable, nice, and he just asked me to roll down the window. And I put my hands up, saying, "Do you need anything from me?" I did not just assume to just go down and get my driver license, because I asked him, "Do you need anything from me? Do you need a license?" I certainly wouldn't reach over and try to go in the glove compartment, He said, "No, that's okay." "What are you doing?" "I'm just texting here, trying to be safe." "Okay. You could pull into the visitor's parking lot there if you want to do that." Carry on. But then he followed me all the way home. The guy followed me all the way home, like 10 miles. So I don't know. Here in America, like you were talking about customs the other day, when the experience you had with your daughter.
The international border, yes.
Yeah, it's the same with the cops now in America. You really, it's not the America that I grew up in, Tim. And we really do have to be careful and be aware of that. Sadly, that is the situation. I mean, this guy, maybe if he had just kept his hands up, maybe that wouldn't even have prevented what happened.
But I'm sure he must have been disoriented. And all of a sudden, a SWAT team comes to your door, and it's like, I mean, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. Right. Then the other guy in Mesa, who was just on the ground, he was obviously unarmed and just got murdered.
Yes.
That kind of thing really needs to be dealt with strongly.
He was an exterminator, a pest exterminator who had a pellet gun in his hotel room, yes.
Right. So there is a danger of, but this to me is a symptom of centralized power. It stems from really the loss of civil liberties through the Patriot Act, really.
Yep. Certainly after 9/11, things have gotten a lot worse in this sense. And you have to wonder if, and like I say, the elite want centralized power. That is their goal. And they are trying to create that kind of a situation where more power can be centralized. And so that's why many people talk about false flags, and that false flags are created so as to facilitate the centralization of power. Like what happened in Boston after the Boston Marathon bombing.
Right.
It was outrageous how these kinds of SWAT teams were going house to house, breaking in, to houses,
Right.
Over what was not that big of an incident, really.
Right.
I mean, in the overall overall scheme of things, it was not a big bomb.
Right.
But the response was huge, and I think there is a tendency now to overreact. Even in one thing that I really that amazes me coming from Asia to America is what happens when there's a traffic accident.
Right.
It's a fender bender, all right?
Right.
And you got ambulance, you got fire trucks, you got police there. I mean, the whole entire law enforcement just converges on this fender bender. All right?
Yeah.
There's a tendency to overreact, and I think that's certainly one thing that happened here. There was an overreaction, or I don't know, information, but there was no attempt to confirm that information.
Right.
I think that's there has to be some way of getting to a location and then trying to confirm the information, to see what's going on inside. Is someone holding and I think they have the equipment to do that now. I mean, they could have, if you have infrared scans, you can look into a house and see whether there's actually a hostage situation going on there. Are people, for example, if this is the middle of the night, are people horizontal in their beds?
Yeah.
Yeah. If everyone is horizontal in their beds, then maybe there isn't a hostage situation going on. Right. Whereas if you see two people together, and they're always together wherever they move, okay, then that maybe is a hostage situation.
Yeah.
I just feel that this was preventable, and there has to be some way that that this can be prevented. And I hope that we will have that answer in the Cheongguk. And I believe that like you said, the community policing, peace police who know their communities, can help to eliminate or at least drastically decrease this kind of police violence.
Yeah, there's no
substitute. That is what it is. I mean, I'm sure this guy who made the shot will be found innocent. The jury will say, well, at that time, based on his information, he had no choice. But it's not an excuse.
No,
it's not an excuse.
Well,
this kind of thing should not be happening. I'm a 2-year-old and 7-year-old child now are without a father, and there's no excuse. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. All right, let's go to another aspect of the culture wars. That is with this about the nude artwork, these classical pictures.
Oh, right, yeah, the classical
all
pictures.
These classical painters.
How classical were they?
Let's see, Lincoln Elementary School. Okay, well, it's an elementary school. All right, so that's one thing. Okay, I can begin to see this. Right. Lincoln Elementary School art teacher Mateo Rueda, and maybe this is sexualizing the children. We'll have to see. I had no idea what was in store for his career when he wrapped up a lesson December 4th by telling students to look through some art postcards in the classroom library for examples of color usage in notable paintings. Okay, maybe, all right, elementary school, okay, at an age when, people are trying to sexualize our kids, okay, all right, I'm beginning to see this. The cards, which are part of an educational package called the Art Box, produced by Faden Publishing, were placed in the library before Rueda began working at the Hiram School. He knew the set portrayed a wide variety of classic artworks, but he has since said he was not aware that 3 or 4 of the 100 pieces featured in the box showed nudity. Before the week was out, Rueda would find himself at the center of a controversy at the school, would be contacted by police after someone filed a classroom pornography complaint against him, and would eventually be out of a job. This situation came to light Wednesday when the Herald-Journal published a letter from the mother of one of Rueda's students complaining about the art teacher's dismissal and praising his work with students. Yes, please sexualize my child. She also let her feelings be known on Facebook, where her posts gained wide circulation among local school parents and educators. Cache County School District officials have declined comment on the matter, noting that this is an ongoing personnel issue. However, one district official who asked not to be identified said that Rueda's termination had more to do with the teacher's interaction with students after the students noticed the nudes than it did with the actual pictures themselves. Parent Vanessa Rose Pixton said this was the nature of a complaint she lodged with the school after learning about the events of that day from her 11-year-old son who was in Rueda's class. Quote, "It wasn't the picture so much that really bothered me. It was the method in which he went about it afterward," Pixton told the Herald-Journal, though contending in the same interview that she thinks the teacher shirked his responsibility by not reviewing the pictures thoroughly before allowing children to access them. "My son felt that Mr. Mateo belittled them," Picton said. "He said Mr. Mateo even told the class, 'There's nothing wrong with female nipples. You guys need to grow up and be mature about this.'" Okay, now I see where okay, now I understand. Yeah, that's a problem.
That is.
Rueda flatly denies he said this or took such a tone. "No, that did not happen," he said this week. "I did not say, when you grow up, you're going to find yourselves going to museums or to places where unavoidably there's going to be nudity. I did say that when you grow up, you're going to find yourselves going to museums or to places where unavoidably there's going to be nudity." Parent Camille Jensen, who wrote the letter to the editor defending Rueda, said neither the pictures nor the teacher's comments upset her daughter. Well, because your daughter has been sexualized. The school sent out an email to parents asking if children were upset by what happened in class. "I asked my daughter if she ever felt uncomfortable, and she said no. She was just very upset that her teacher was in trouble," Jensen said. Asked if he thought the nudes were appropriate for 6th graders in his class, Rueda said he did not. "This is not material at all that I would use. I had no idea," he said. In an explanation of the incident provided to Jensen and posted on her Facebook page, Rueda explained things this way. "The library had several art books and 8 boxes of postcards showing a wide array of artwork. These materials were provided by the school, had been there for years, and had presumably been used by students many times before. To my surprise, some of the postcards contained nudity. Some students expressed discomfort about some of the images, so I immediately took back from students the postcards. I felt I could make students feel the postcards I felt could make students feel uncomfortable. So he just took back some of them. Then I explained to the whole class that art can sometimes show images that are not always comfortable to all, that art is better understood when placed in its proper context, that the human body is often portrayed in art, and that the images of the school collection are icons of art history and a patrimony of humanity." Rueda later went on through the card boxes and other materials in the classroom library with Lincoln Elementary School principal Jenny the principal, and they discovered several more examples of nudity. According to Cache County Sheriff's Office, Bust was destroying this material when a deputy arrived at the school in response to a resident's complaint that Rueda was exposing students to pornography. She said she was putting the postcards and paintings in the shredder at the request of the school district so they wouldn't be distributed again. Sheriff Chad Jensen said, "We got some of the pictures and showed them to the county attorney's office, and they said these wouldn't meet the definition of pornography. They declined to file charges." According to Rueda, the two nudes accidentally accessed by students were an Impressionist-era portrait by Italian painter and sculptor Amadeo Modigliani, titled Iris Tree, and a partial nude titled Odalisque by 18th century Rococo-style artist Francois Boucher. Both can be found online with a simple Google search. Among the other notable paintings in the art box are Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa and Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers, non-nude works by celebrated artists Paul Klee, Claude Monet, Marc Chagall, Marcel Duchamp, Paul Gauguin, J.M.W. Turner, and many others are also in the set. In the explanation to parent, Camille Jensen wrote that Busta emailed him shortly after the Monday, December 4th class period, worried over several parents' concerns about how he handled the situation, saying he would be put on a one-day administrative absence. On Wednesday, he met with the principal and the district human resources director, and they decided to suspend him 2 more days with a signed pledge not to let this type of incident happen again.
That's the teacher that got.
This is the teacher that got suspended, yes.
But he didn't know the pictures were in the art box. They were already.
Well,
in the
parents are
library.
saying he should have known that he should have but of course he is saying, well, this was used before. I mean, many other students have used this. It's nothing new. Right. That this that box of art existed in the school before he came to the school, right. And it looks like this was not the first time. It wasn't like he was opening the package for the first time. They've been used by other students before. Right. Just that this time someone complained, I guess. But I think this occurs in the context of the sexualization of our children.
Right, of course.
And I think apparently someone with maybe a more sort of a sheepdog mentality this time decided to
maybe so,
decided to make a complaint, I would say. I feel bad for the teacher, but I think I come on the side of the parents on this one. Yeah.
Well, but oftentimes
in an elementary school. I mean, elementary school.
Very young, right?
Yeah, and but I mean, this art, right? Is you have the Hellenistic worship of the human body. Right. That's part of Hellenistic culture, of course, which is part of the Cain type culture. That on the other hand, you have the Hebraic culture, and of course, there's a lot of art that stems from that or was influenced by that, by the worship of the human body, and so. Sometimes you have high school girls painting nudes, actually, where a nude model will be brought into an art class in high school, male model, and you have high school girls being assigned to draw to draw based on this nude male model. That I know happens.
That's quite common in Europe.
It's also quite common in America as well. Yeah, it's quite common in America as well. So there is this, and that is certainly the sexualization of children. It's certainly the extension and the expression of that Hellenistic worship of the human body. But yeah, I think we have to give kudos for the parent that complained about this. So it's still a trend that is ongoing, but maybe at least for this elementary school, a little bit of a break has been put on that trend. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, they could have just taken those 3 or 4 postcards out of the pack.
Yeah, he could have.
Why are they in there?
Yeah, he could have. He could have gone through the pack and say, "Hey, wait a second, these are not good. I don't want I wouldn't want my child seeing these." Yeah. And actually, I think it's a woman. I think the teacher is a woman. She could have taken them out of the pack and distributed the remaining, and there would not have been this problem. Yeah. So yeah, but in the context of things, it's we can see how this happens, and this is a part of that overall problem that we're having in America, and maybe one more reason to homeschool your children.
Yeah, it's a great argument for homeschooling, for sure.
Yes. So that you can decide which classical art pieces your 11-year-old sees. You can decide.
And there's a lot of Hebraic-based great art.
Yeah, there is.
It's much more powerful than the
There's a lot of art where everybody's dressed.
Yes. And Sistine Chapel is... Adam is somewhat undressed, but not disrobed.
He gets pretty close.
Yeah.
He gets pretty close. I think there's something draped over him or something like that, yes.
But the theme, the Hebraic theme is so powerful in the art. So art is always this kind of gray area place where it can be used by the dark side quite easily to invade young people's sentiments and mentality.
Well, we're coming close now to the end of our broadcast, so let's cover a couple of stories that look interesting. One is President ramps up Border Patrol recruitment. I just want to fill out the rest of our time with this important story. President Trump doesn't yet have his big, beautiful border wall, but the administration is ramping up recruitment of border agents going into the new year in a bid to enhance security with more manpower, if not bricks and barbed wire. Actually, I think he mentioned bricks, but I'm not sure he mentioned barbed wire. Anyway. But up until now, the White House's fix to immigration issues has included Trump reversing many of the predecessor's policies, increasing roundups of illegal immigrants and restricting the number of refugees allowed into the country. And there has been some success. The number of people trying to sneak over the border has dropped to its lowest level in 4 decades. Illegal border crossings are down 24%, according to the Department of Homeland Security's most recent statistics released in December. During the government's 2017 fiscal year, border agents made 310,531 arrests. While constructing the highly touted border wall with Mexico still hasn't started, the administration's hope to build on the statistical trend lines by carrying out a January executive order to hire 5,000 new Border Patrol agents. To accelerate the hires, the federal government on November 17th awarded a massive 5-year, $297 million contract to a division of Accenture. Accenture will also be responsible for hiring 2,000 customs officers and 500 new agents for the Office of Air and Marine Operations. The proposed hiring surge is the largest since the George W. Bush administration, when Congress funded an expansion of border enforcement following the September 11 terror attacks. The nearest push to recruit 5,000 new agents, though, comes with its own set of pitfalls. Already the union is concerned about a rush to hire amid concerns about corruption in the ranks. As long as the Border Patrol continues to place priority on the quantity of recruits rather than the quality of recruits, corruption within the Border Patrol will continue to be a problem, the National Border Patrol Council told Fox News in a statement. I'm always skeptical of these kinds of statements by unions.
Right.
They may be concerned that not all of the people coming into the force are going to join the union. I don't know. I will have to check into that. The administration enters this task at a disadvantage. The number of officers has actually dropped by 220 as the Border Patrol continues to struggle to meet minimal staffing quotas set by lawmakers. Congress requires a force of 21,370 agents, but an employee count in May revealed that there were only 19,500 agents on the job. Making matters worse is that between 2013 and 2016, an average of 523 agents were hired, while another 904 left. According to former Department of Homeland Security watchdog John Roth, it takes more than 9 months to hire one Border Patrol agent and about 7 months to hire an ICE officer. Roth told the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs in February that an audit highlighted numerous bottlenecks in effective hiring, and there were inadequate systems to track and process applicants at the DHS. Critics argue that in order to meet the ambitious hiring goal, the applicant pool will be widened and standards could be sacrificed. That's what happened the last time the agency tried to up its workforce in the mid-2000s. More than 140 Customs and Border Protection agents have been arrested or convicted on corruption charges in the past 12 years, according to a joint analysis by the Center for Investigative Reporting and the Texas Tribune.
That's actually a bit worrying to think of the Mexican border. It might end up like Newark Airport. I mean, that'd be a total disaster. Can you imagine having a bunch of corrupt officials on the Mexican border with all those drugs coming through there?
Yes. Yes, I can. And also the trafficking of women and other things that happen in the Mexican, that as illegal crossings occur, yes.
But why is it that the wall is so delayed? Is Mexico not paying for it?
Well, that's one reason, yes, and Congress is not paying for it either. Another thing is that, of course, they're building prototypes right now.
Yeah.
But a lot of
contractors are being intimidated. There was that you mentioned last week.
We mentioned that, yes, that cities around the country are saying that they will check their providers to make sure that they're not involved in the border wall construction, and if they are, they will boycott those construction providers. And so even, for example, in Rhode Island, a city, I think the state of Rhode Island was saying that any company that works on the border wall is not going to work in our state. So this is kind of a democratic resistance that's going on. Corrupt officials gave sensitive information to cartels, accepted millions of dollars in bribes, and derailed billions of dollars in surveillance measures. To combat a spike in corruption, Congress mandated that all new recruits pass lie detector tests. That didn't work out so well. The Associated Press reported in January that 65% of applicants failed the test, more than double the average rate of 8 law enforcement agencies. Alex Naras, an immigration policy analyst for the Cato Institute, says a mass hire of agents isn't an effective way to beef up border security, and that Congress should address DHS personnel issues before hiring new agents of further lowering hiring standards. He's calling for more investigators instead. The most critical recommendation is hiring enough CPB OPR investigators so that the office is both entirely operational and has substantially reduced its backlog of cases, he said. But the Trump administration maintains more boots on the ground to patrol the borders is the way to go.
What are the investigators investigating? Corruption in the ranks?
I guess so. That's one thing, but they have a backlog of cases, yeah. So anyway, America's border continues to be a problem. What was it we read yesterday? 1.8 million new immigrants to the U.S. During the year, or during 2016? Something like that, yeah. So the United States continues to be very, very open to the world, both in terms of legal immigration and illegal immigration. And so the decision in January, the president has to come, or I think is expected to come to a decision in January about the delayed action on childhood arrivals, or DACA, and the Dreamers. And that decision comes in the context of all this. And one thing that's pointed out is that if they give the amnesty to the Dreamers, then that will result in chain immigration, where they will bring their families and so forth, or be legally eligible to bring those families and so forth. So
they're coming to America, Tim.
Apparently this is still the land of opportunity, or at least it is seen that way. Problem, of course, is that they come and they vote in a way that makes it less and less a land of opportunity.
Right. That's
they come from centralized power states, and they assume that that is the way to go. And this is the problem, I think, with people who are set free from slavery.
Yeah.
They look for other power structures.
We've seen that, haven't we?
I won't go into that. I won't go into that.
Okay.
I'm resisting.
Okay.
Thankfully, we're about to run out of time. I will not go into that. But yes, people who are released, this is a general, if the shoe fits, wear it, all right?
Yeah. It's a mental trap.
Let's be careful that when we are released from slavery, we do not search for other centralized power. We do not search for other masters. All right?
Amen.
Give me another story. It's 8 o'clock. Thank goodness. Okay.
Are you sure? We got a couple minutes.
I was about to get myself in trouble here.
We got a couple minutes left.
About to get myself in trouble. I better stop. Better stop. Better stop. Better wish everybody a happy New Year's weekend. Stay safe. Stay away from Times Square. Stay away from, what is it in London?
It's
Big
the
Ben?
Thames River.
Thames River?
Yeah, the
Tower,
the Millennium Wheel.
The
Millennium Wheel.
The
big
wheel.
fireworks display.
Fireworks.
Yeah,
Stay away, all right?
Tower of London.
Watch all that on television and pray. Begin the new year with prayer, if you like. That would be a very good thing to do. We will, of course, have our New Year's celebration on the night of February 15th and 16th, starting at 11:30 p.m. here, as we bring in the God's Day of February 16th. So everybody have a safe and wonderful weekend. God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.